Chapter 235. Do not look at me. I will not be able to bear it. Time strangely stopped in that instant, and all things in heaven and earth seemed to have lost their voices. The entire room of lights was swaying, but it could not be compared to that person's eyes. It was clearly the most intimate appearance, like a lover's whispering ambiguity, but in a blink of an eye, it turned into a thick, killing intent. Xie Jingxing's eyes hung down and there was a slight warmth under his palms. It was as if he could feel the eyelashes slightly blinking, like fluffy butterfly wings. With a flap, it wanted to fly away but was caught and could not fly away. Gao Yang, go out. Xie Jingxing said. Gao Yang frowned. What do you mean? Go out first. Xie Jingxing said calmly. Gao Yang glanced at him and did not say anything before picking up the things that were wrapped up in the cloth and walked out. After his footsteps disappeared far away, Xie Jingxing slowly released his hands. He spread out his hands, and on his fair palms, there seemed to be sparkles flashing under the lights. Just now Shen Miao seemed to be crying. Xie Jingxing lazily said, "It is just death, what are you crying for?" He still wanted to say something, but when he saw the expression of the young female in front of him, he suddenly shut his mouth. Shen Miao's brows were delicate and pretty, but that little bit of childishness on her face was now covered by the coldness on her face. Her eyes were as clear as water, but there was no trace of tears or sadness at all. Most likely it was a trick just now, as she was not afraid at all. As Xie Jingxing's thoughts flashed, he saw Shen Miao suddenly raising her elbow to hit his chest. This move was ruthless and accurate. If it was another person, one feared that they would be knocked to the ground, but Xie Jingxing only swayed slightly and had already grabbed Shen Miao's left arm. Shen Miao was pulled by him and almost fell into Xie Jingxing's embrace. But one saw her quickly taking out something from her sleeves, and without hesitation, she stabbed at Xie Jingxing's arm. That hairpin was small, and if one did not pay attention, one would not be able to see it. Shen Miao's actions were vicious and did not show any mercy as the hairpin pierced into the latter's arm. Xie Jingxing's eyes darkened, and with a wave of his hand, Shen Miao was once again thrown to the front of the stone wall. Xie Jingxing's hand was on Shen Miao's fragile neck, and it seemed that as long as he exerted a little strength, her neck would be easily broken. His voice was slightly heavy, with an almost undetectable anger. He said, as expected of someone from the general's residence. You've learned 100% of sneak attacks. Shen Miao's gaze landed on Xie Jingxing's arm, where half of the hairpin had fallen out and blood gradually flowed out and dyed his sleeves red as it stuck to his arm. Xie Jingxing followed Shen Miao's gaze and smiled indifferently. It does not matter even if there is poison, I will definitely kill you before that. His eyes were extremely beautiful, and when he was casually looking at others, it was the most intoxicating. If that smile, yet not a smile, was seen by the young ladies in the Ding capital, there would be a debate. But Shen Miao could see the well-hidden indifference and coldness in it. What kind of person was Xie Jingxing? He seemed to be very complicated. The image of him in the Ding capital was that even though he had the ability, he was cynical and unruly. He was destined to be unable to be controlled by others and was unable to display his fists and feet in his official career. But at this moment Shen Miao had doubts in her heart. Was the Xie Jingxing in the eyes of the common people the real Xie Jingxing? He was indeed unruly and fierce, but for such a person to hide so deeply, was he really not interested in power and politics? Xie Jingxing seemed to be dissatisfied with her being distracted as he leaned closer and stared at her. Shen Miao, if I kill you today, there would be no one to protect the Shen family in the future. Shen Miao's gaze moved and saw Xie Jingxing in front of her laughing viciously. Shen Yuan has already returned to the capital, and with the second and third household of the Shen family joining hands, what are the chances of Shen Xian winning? His hands slowly tightened and every sentence was directed at Shen Miao's fatal weakness. The Fu family is eyeing the Shen family covetously, and Shen Xian's future road will be difficult. The things that you seek and plan will be ruined in my hands today. If you want to take revenge, you will have to wait for the rest of your life. Chapter 236. The more ruthless he was, the more unbelievably handsome he looked. It was as if he could see through one's heart, as his words were all directed at Shen Miao's most worried matter. Shen Miao was reborn, and all she wanted was for the Shen family to be safe and sound. What she planned was nothing more than to take revenge, and if she were to die here, everything would come to an abrupt end. Xie Jingxing's eyes did not have a trace of sympathy or pity. He was truly cold and ruthless. No matter what her identity was, even if she was the imperial family's princess today, there would be no reason for her to retreat peacefully after breaking the relationship between Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang. This was the reason why she risked her life just now. Otherwise, with her cautious character, she would not use such a risky method until the last moment. Suddenly the smiling faces of Wan Yu and Fu Ming flashed past her eyes. Shen Miao's eyes widened, and she did not even notice that 2 lines of tears were flowing down her cheeks. Too unwilling. If she were to die here, it would be too unwilling. Xie Jingxing saw her tears and narrowed his eyes as he looked at her. He did not forget Shen Miao's ruthless move just now. A female who used tears to gain sympathy would not work with him. But Shen Miao only stared and silently cried. There was no pitiful or weak expression in her eyes as her tears flowed woodenly, but it suddenly made one feel sad. It was as if before this, she had already experienced pain that ordinary people could not understand and was at the end of the road, giving birth to great sorrow. The great sorrow was silent, but the tears were loyal to the body and flowed down first. Xie Jingxing frowned as he looked at her, and the hand that was clutching Shen Miao's throat gradually loosened. However, Shen Miao did not notice it at all. Finally Xie Jingxing put down his hand, and his expression showed a little helplessness. His figure was tall, and when he pushed the little girl to the corner, it gave him a strange feeling, as if he was bullying a little child. Even though Xie Jingxing was well aware that Shen Miao and the word little child were not compatible. After a moment, he finally pulled out the hairpin from his arm. It was very painful to pull out the hairpin, and Xie Jingxing's brows slightly wrinkled as he played with the hairpin in his hands. Seeing Shen Miao staring at him, he suddenly felt an inexplicable awkwardness in his heart. He said, "Don't cry. I will not kill you." After a pause, he added, "Just to scare you." Shen Miao heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. She knew that Xie Jingxing was not trying to scare her. In that instant of killing intent, the other party really had the intention to kill. At the end his heart softened, and it was just a few drops of tears. As for what moved Xie Jingxing, Shen Miao was also not clear. Shen was Shen Miao. I once saw third uncle's copy of Lu Yuan's banquet at home. When I was searching around, I inadvertently discovered this secret room. I was curious and didn't expect to come across you. You, Shen. Shen Miao lied without changing her expression, "Yes. Little girl, I am not one of the Chen brothers. Don't use the method of killing with a borrowed knife on me," Xie Jingxing said lazily. Shen Miao was a bad person deep down in her bones, and even at this stage, she still wanted to scheme against Shen Wan. Today I did not see anything and did not hear anything. If you do not make things difficult for me, naturally I will not make things difficult for you. Shen Miao looked at him, "Let us mind our own business. You can't make things difficult for me either." Xie Jingxing's arrogant tone made one's teeth itch with hatred. He said, "Today I will spare your life, but if this matter is leaked out even a little, then your Shen family cannot blame me for being unlucky." Shen Miao quickly replied, "I will not leak it out." Xie Jingxing was very satisfied with her temperament of knowing when to stop. He was silent for a moment before suddenly asking, "Shen Miao, do you have enmity with the Fu family?" Chapter 237. He said, "Fu family" and not, "Tian family," and the meaning of his words was somewhat thought-provoking. Shen Miao turned her head and looked at him. Her heart was slightly moved, but she said lightly, "Little Marquis feel that it is so." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows, as expected. He looked at Shin Miao. Since this matter is over, you should leave first. If you stay here for too long and attract other people over, I will not be able to save you. Shin Miao did not say a word and turned to leave. Today's face-to-face encounter with Xia Jingxing made her understand some things in a trance. At least this little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Linan was not as simple as he looked on the surface. This kind of person could not be used and could not be offended. If Xia Jingxing's enemy was also the imperial family of Ming Qi, naturally she would end up well, but if not, one must not have any ideas on him. Shin Miao had just walked 2 steps when Xia Jingxing followed. His legs were long and he quickly caught up to Shin Miao and threw her a small medicine bottle. Do not say that I bullied you and made you cry. Following that he took big strides forward and left before Shin Miao. Under the dim light of the match, Shin Miao's face suddenly showed a little shame. Just now she also made a risky move. In the previous life, after she returned from the Qin country, when she was fighting for favor with Mei Furen, her temperament was extremely tough. She once heard other beauties offering advice, your ladyship is always solemn and solemn. Even though she is the mother of the world, His Majesty will not necessarily like her. Look at that Mei Furen, gentle and careful, and even know how to act spoiled. It is said that crying children will have sweets to eat. This world's love is also the same. Men have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex while females must be like water. But at that time she scoffed at this saying and felt that such actions could not be seen in public. How could the dignified Empress be confused with the flattering methods of those females? But just now under Xia Jingxing's murderous intent, she suddenly remembered that beauty's words, crying children will have sweets to eat. Now she was still a budding young female and would be innocent and tender in her next life. Moreover, she did not have the phoenix robe of the Empress, so if she were to act spoiled, it would be seen. Even in Shin Miao's dreams, she would not have thought that with her tough temperament, she would cry like a pear blossom in the rain to a male. However, the ending surprised her. Xia Jingxing had such a fierce and unruly temperament and he actually let her go. However, in this confrontation, she had used a very dishonorable method. After leaving the secret room, one did not know where Xia Jingxing and Gao Yang left from as there was no one in the tea room. She walked out of the tea room and Mo Qing was still guarding outside. Shin Miao asked him, was there anyone who came out from inside just now? Person. Mo Qing was surprised, isn't there only young lady inside? Did Miss meet someone else inside? No. Shin Miao smiled gently and said, just casually asking. But in her heart, she had a higher opinion of Xia Jingxing's ability. Shen, Shao, Mo Qing was somewhat puzzled as he did not know why Shin Miao changed her mind in a while. Just now she had clearly said to wait for Shin Qiu in the tea room, but now it was not the case. But naturally he would not refute Shin Miao's point of view, especially this kind of small matter. He silently agreed and followed Shin Miao out. When Shin Miao left, she looked back at the closed doors of the tea room and did not know if Xia Jingxing and Gao Yang were still there. Today she was here for that thing, but who knew that the thing had fallen into Xia Jingxing's hands? Shin Miao could not make any headway for a moment. According to the traces of the previous lifetime, Xia Jingxing should not have discovered the secret room at this time. Could it be that in this lifetime something had changed and even Xia Jingxing's fate had changed? Or could it be that in her previous lifetime, her short and tragic life, there were some neglected truths? Chapter 238. This question was not solved until she saw Shin Qiu and returned to the Shin residence in the evening. It was Shin Qiu who saw that Shin Miao was in a daze after coming out from the residence of the first prince and thought that Shin Miao was frightened by the scene of blood all over the ground in the first prince residence. He instructed the kitchen to boil some tranquilizing soup and was scolded by Luo Shuayan for bringing Shin Miao to such an unlucky place. Shin Qiu felt wronged, but Shin Miao did not feel it at all. On the other side, there were also people who felt injustice for Xia Jingxing, that girl is too ruthless. Gao Yang stared at the wound in front of him, dumbfounded. Xie Jingxing took off his outer robe and only wore a loose inner garment. The collar of his shirt was loose, revealing half of his strong and straight body. His sleeves were rolled up halfway, revealing his arm. The wound caused by the hairpin was so deep that the bone could be seen. Xie Jingxing allowed Gao Yang to apply medicine for him as he played with the hairpin in his hands. The hairpin was an ordinary plain silver hairpin with a simple wavy pattern. However, the tip of the hairpin had been polished until it was incomparably sharp, comparable to a silver needle used as a hidden weapon. The tip of the hairpin was also bent like a barb. If such a hairpin were to pierce into a person's body, it would definitely tear off a large piece of flesh. For example, Xie Jingxing, there was a wound on his arm. Shen Xian's family is noble and virtuous, but that girl's actions are so vicious. She doesn't look like Shen Xian's daughter at all. Could it be that they got the wrong child? Gao Yang was still very surprised. Look at how she did not hold back when she used it. It has already entered into the flesh. He spread the powder evenly on the wound. Xie Jingxing frowned and sucked in a breath of cold air. Endure it even if it hurts. Gao Yang snapped, Xie-san, I've been with you for so many years, but I've never seen you take pity on women. What did you do today? She bumped into such a big thing and even hurt you, yet you let her go just like that. I say, Gao Yang rubbed his chin. Could it be that you really like her? She's still a little girl. She doesn't have anything she wants. Are you crazy? Xie Jingxing said impatiently, enough. I am not that shameless to bully a young lady. You're speaking as if you've never bullied a little girl before. Gao Yang sneered. I really don't understand what you're thinking. He carefully wrapped the bandage around Xie Jingxing's arm and side after wrapping it up. Now that we have the item, what's next? Search again. Xie Jingxing said. The Fu family will find out sooner or later. Gao Yang frowned. Actually, what I find most strange is how did Shen Miao know about the secret room? If she was from the Fu family, you would have been exposed. She has enmity with the Fu family. Xie Jingxing said lazily, she can't wait to borrow my hands to kill. As for how I found it, it's probably a coincidence. A trace of sharpness flashed in his eyes. Shen Miao said that she accidentally found out about the secret chamber, but he did not believe this reason at all. Shen Miao was a person who did things with a purpose, and it could be seen from the matter of her dealing with Shen Qing and Prince Yu. Something that didn't seem to be of much use could play an unexpected role in the end. Xie Jingxing even had a conjecture that Shen Miao dealt with Prince Yu, perhaps it was because of the thing in his hands. But how did she know? Even he and Gao Yang had just found out about it not long ago and spent a lot of energy on it. Shen Miao was only an unmarried daughter and there were many inconveniences in investigating the news, but she was able to know the secret. The secrets on her body were no less than others. In short, it is better to be careful. Gao Yang stood up and picked up the remaining bandages and medicine before walking out of the room. Moreover, now that she has found out my identity, one do not know what kind of changes will happen in the future. Chapter 239. Xie Jingxing was left alone in the room. He pointed the hairpin in his hand at the flickering flame in the lamp and looked at it thoughtfully. After a moment, the scene of the young female's eyes widening and crying silently appeared in his mind. He was not one who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex and did not have any other thoughts towards Shen Miao. It was just that in that instant, he inexplicably could not bear it. This kind of unbearable emotion finally broke his usual calm approach, and now thinking about it, he was somewhat regretful. The wound on his arm was somewhat numb and even more painful. When the other party attacked, she did not show any mercy at all, and if he did not dodge fast enough, the hairpin might have landed on his face. In fact, Shen Miao's tears were perhaps a kind of method. Xie Jingxing was well aware that that young female was incomparably cunning and her mind was sensitive and intelligent. The method that she used when she was caught off guard had a wonderful ability. The sudden show of weakness was most likely because she wanted to survive. Xie Jingxing opened his hand and the silver hairpin flashed a small brilliance in his palm, but it made one think of the moment when this hand covered a pair of eyes, the fluttering feeling in his palm, like a fluttering butterfly that was about to dance in his palm. It was that moment of fragility that made his heart give birth to some strange feelings and sympathy that should not belong to him. Little poisonous woman. Xie Jingxing suddenly smiled. Under the lamp, the youth's handsome brows were oppressively eye-catching and the smile on his lips was playful as he muttered, one should not be soft-hearted. In the eastern courtyard of the Shen residence, flowers were blooming at this moment. In Rongjing Tang, old Shen Furen's face was gloomy as she looked at Shen Gui and said, so to say, there is no way for that Qing girl to come out? Shen Gui shook his head. Prince Yu residence was exterminated in one night and only Qing was left. No matter what one said, one cannot escape responsibility and the case still has to be retried. Other than such a big matter, one do not know if His Majesty will blame us. Old Shen Furen said worriedly, what is going on with Qing or that girl? Is this matter really unrelated to her? Her words were filled with suspicion towards Shen Qing. Ren Wanyun exploded when she heard it. She threw herself in front of old Shen Furen and knelt down, scaring old Shen Furen. Ren Wanyun cried, Old Furen, you have watched Qing grow up and you do not know what kind of temperament she has. How could she do such a thing? Moreover, what ability does Qing have to be able to have a relationship with such a powerful person? It is clear that Prince Yu residence had made enemies and Qing was just lucky to keep her life. We have already let her down and must not leave her alone. Ren Wanyun and old Shen Furen had been mother-in-law and daughter-in-law for so many years, and was very clear about old Shen Furen's temperament. Old Shen Furen was extremely selfish in her bones and would change the direction of the wind. Even if he had some feelings for Shen Qing, he would not hesitate to abandon Shen Qing when it was time to put his own safety first. Ren Wanyun sometimes felt that Shen Gui was such a heartless person, but it was only because old Shen Furen's blood flowed in his bones that his selfish temperament was exactly the same. After old Shen Furen heard Ren Wanyun's words, she became angrier and said, Eldest daughter-in-law, your words are strange. How have we wronged Qing lass? It was I who forced her to have an affair with Prince Yu of the first rank. It was I who forced her to shamelessly bear a child. I didn't teach her any of these rules. Old Shen Furen was a female singer and a person who came out from the marketplace. Naturally the words that she said were not pleasant to hear. Even if Ren Wanyun was shrewd to the bones, she was also angered by old Shen Furen's merciless words. She said, Mother, how can you say that about Qing? She is your granddaughter. Chen Roqiu opened her mouth to persuade, second saw, speak less. Mother is also worried about Qing which made her angry. Everyone knows that among the 3D young ladies, Mother likes Qing the most. Chapter 240. She was originally the young lady that she liked the most, but now she did not hesitate to abandon her. Old Shen Furen's selfish nature was really despicable. Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan revealed a look of disdain but did not say a word and treated it as a show. Shen Yuan glanced at Chen Roqiu. His gaze was also very gloomy, which made Chen Roqiu's words pause as she was somewhat fearful. Shen Yuan walked over to Ren Wanyun's side and helped her up before looking at old Shen Furen. Grandmother need not be anxious, the matter has not reached the worst stage. Currently younger sister is only suspected and has not been convicted. His sister had nothing to do with this matter, and the truth would come to light after some time. I will investigate this matter seriously and won't let my sister be wrongly accused. When old Shen Furen heard it, her gaze eased up a little. Among her sons and grandsons, the one she liked the most was her youngest grandson, Shen Yuan Bo, and the one she was most proud of was this extremely capable Shen Yuan at such a young age. Moreover, Shen Yuan had always been good at making her happy, so she immediately nodded her head and said, if that's the case, then go and investigate properly. If Qing lass is really innocent, I naturally don't wish for her to be wrongly accused. After a pause, she looked at Ren Wanyun and sneered, "But I see that your mother is possessed. If her mind is not clear, then do not go out and stay in the residence. Do not find trouble for me." Ren Wanyun was angry and hateful as her face flushed red. She did not know when it started, but old Shin Furen's dissatisfaction with her had increased, and now she was wantonly humiliating her in front of all her children. Even Chen Ro Chiu looked at her with ridicule. It was only when Shin Yuan supported her back to Kai Yun Yuan did Ren Wanyun catch her breath. She pulled Shin Yuan's arm and said, "Yuaner, think of a way to save your younger sister. How would Qing'er have such a great ability? How could she be the murderer?" "Mother, don't worry." Shin Yuan comforted her, "Since younger sister was wrongly accused, there is no need to be afraid of people investigating. Now that she's being suspected, it's only because the real culprit hasn't come to light. Since that's the case, if we find the real culprit, sister's injustice will naturally be resolved." When Ren Wanyun heard this, it was as if she had found a life-saving straw and her eyes immediately lit up. She asked happily, "When will the murderer be found? How long will your sister be locked up for? When will you find the murderer?" Shin Yuan looked at Ren Wanyun. Ren Wanyun's complexion was very haggard and it had been a long time since she put on makeup. Her skin looked old and dull and her hair was very disheveled. There was no trace of her previous meticulous and exquisite appearance. She had always been a person who was particular about her appearance and wealth. Now that she was so sloppy, it was as if she was a completely different person. And the cause of all this was because of a young girl who had been called an idiot in the past. Shin Yuan felt a headache coming on. He had always prided himself on his intelligence and did not expect that upon returning to the capital, he would be given such a big mess upon returning to the Fu. Ren Wanyun's position in the residence had plummeted. It was fine that Shin Qing was pregnant out of wedlock, but now she was involved in the massacre of Prince Yu residence. Without knowing why, Shin Yuan suddenly remembered the day of Shin Qing's marriage when he was talking to Shin Miao. At that time Shin Miao said, "No one can say for sure about the matters of the world. Everyone has their own fortunes and misfortunes and it is possible that there is no road ahead." Now there was really no road in front of Shin Qing, and even if there was a road, the road would be extremely difficult. She was the only survivor in the entire Prince Yu residence, and at this point, Shin Yuan could clearly see that the culprit did not leave Shin Qing's life because of soft-heartedness or sympathy. To leave her life, it was the talisman that hastened Shin Qing's death. At the very least, there was a huge difference between being implicated in the massacre of a family and dying with the crime of murder in mind. The culprit clearly deliberately let Shin Qing fall into such a difficult situation, but Shin Qing was just a young lady. Who would be so ruthless to a young lady? Was it Shin Miao? How would Shin Miao order so many killers to kill the people of Prince Yu residence for her? It would be difficult to do it with that kind of manpower. Shin Yuan's gaze was heavy. No matter if the person behind the scenes was Shin Miao or not, he must investigate this matter to the end. Since that person was targeting Shin Qing, it might not necessarily be targeting the second household of the Shin family. Even though Shin Qing's future was difficult, it was not to the point where she was at a dead end. He must uncover the person behind the scenes and return it 1,000 times over. Shin Yuan thought like this, but he did not expect that just like Shin Miao's words, no one could say for sure about the matters of the world. Everyone has their fortunes and misfortunes, and it was possible that there was no road ahead. On the second day, his path was sealed into a dead end. Chapter 241. With such a big matter happening in the Ding capital, the entire city was talking about the tragedy of Prince Yu's family being exterminated. The rumors were like a snowball rolling bigger and bigger, and the more it spread, the more outrageous it became. There were all kinds of guesses, and some even suspected that the one who exterminated the entire Prince Yu residence was the lover of the newly married Prince Yu's consort, who flew into a rage for a beauty and let the entire Prince Yu residence be buried with her. Such a rumor was much more alluring, as if there was suddenly a trace of charming color in the cruel truth. Such rumors could be found everywhere, and the person who heard them probably didn't think much of it. However, in the vast river of rumors, there was one that was extremely shocking. The meaning of this rumor was that the extermination of the entire Prince Yu residence in one night was actually the intention of the Shin family. As for why the general residence would do that, the water was too deep, and one would have to see the officials themselves to think about it. If one were to say that the previous rumors only brought ridicule to Shin Qing and her family, then this conjecture with the color of conspiracy had really pushed the Shin residence to the front of everyone. Prince Yu residence of the first rank was exterminated and not even a beast was left in the residence, but a bride that just married into the family was left behind. What capabilities did this bride have to make the other party spare her life, unless she had some relation with her? If it was the Shin family, then all of this naturally made sense. But why did the Shin family have to go against the Prince Yu residence? On the surface, perhaps it was because they were dissatisfied with the marriage, but if one were to probe deeper, now that there was a turbulent undercurrent in the court, who knew if the Shin family had been incited by others, or if it was to express something? These things were not seen by the common people, but the old foxes in the officialdom would not let it go. In a short period of time, the Shin family was placed in the teeth of the storm. Early in the morning, Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang came over to invite Shin Miao to eat snacks. The Shin residents did not have the mood to take care of other matters, and even the 3 meals in the small kitchen were sloppy. Other than Rong Jing Tang's side, most of the matters were dealt with by themselves, so Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang simply went out to buy snacks and let Shin Miao eat some sweet soup to warm her body. After eating breakfast, Shin Miao also finished grooming and looked at her appearance before slightly frowning. She then said to Guyu, "Go and bring the fox skin scarf that eldest brother sent over." Hey, the girl remembered to wear that scarf. Guyu dug out the scarf from the box and wanted to help Shin Miao put it on but was stopped by Shin Miao. "I will do it myself." That scarf was made from a fox skin that was snow white and there was not a single strand of mixed fur. It was also hunted by Shin Qiu in the northwest mountain forest, and at the beginning he saw that the fur was precious, so he got the tailor to make an exquisite scarf for Shin Miao. It was just that Shin Miao did not like to wear it and was placed under the box. She did not know what happened today, but she suddenly thought of it, which made Guyu somewhat happy. After all, it was such a good-looking leather, but it was placed at the bottom of the box all day and did not see the light of day. It was a pity. Shin Miao wrapped the scarf around her neck, and when Guyu saw it, she exclaimed in admiration, "Young lady, looks really good with this scarf around your neck, it makes you look even fairer. It also looks warm. It's so nice." Shin Miao's eyes hung down and her fingers gently brushed the soft fur, but she thought of the bruise on her neck in the mirror. That was the mark left by Xie Jingxing when he choked her throat yesterday. At that time this person was not lenient and she did not notice it yesterday, but today it was exceptionally obvious. Even though the collars of the clothes worn in the cold winter were high, but if one was not careful and was seen by others, one feared that Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan would not take it lying down. It was better to have less trouble than more trouble, and it was better to wrap it tighter. Putting down the bronze mirror in her hands, Shin Miao opened the door and walked out. Coincidentally, she saw Shin Qiu standing under the tree in the courtyard and giving instructions to the soldier beside him. Shin Qiu's guards were all from the army and were different from the ordinary guards, as they had a kind of brave and iron-blooded bearing. Seeing Shin Miao, Shin Qiu spoke to the soldier before turning around and smiled, "Younger sister." Chapter 242. What happened? Shin Miao asked. Normally in the early morning, Shin Qiu would always stand in the courtyard and practice his sword and spear. The best place in the western courtyard was this spacious courtyard, and Shin Qiu and Shin Xian loved to spar in this courtyard. Occasionally when they were in the mood, Luo Shuiyan would also join in. These days Shin Miao was already used to seeing Shin Qiu's figure practicing martial arts when she opened the door. Today there was no movement, so naturally something happened. Shin Qiu laughed twice and said, "Nothing much." "Why did younger sister come out so early? Not sleeping a little more?" Shin Miao did not even blink when he changed the topic. "It is because of eldest sister and the Shin family's matter." Shin Qiu quickly coughed and pulled Shin Miao into the room. After entering the room, he chased the servants out and closed the door before looking at Shin Miao. Younger sister, do not say these words outside. What exactly happened? Shin Qiu scratched his head. It is not a big matter. Just leave it to father, mother and me. Do not go out these days and do not bother about this matter. He spoke vaguely, most likely wanting to fool Shin Miao. But if even Shin Qiu could fool Shin Miao, then Shin Miao would not be able to continue living in the Shin family. She stared at Shin Qiu without blinking. All right. Eldest brother, you do not need to hide from me. It is the matter of Prince Yu Residence's extermination. Others suspected eldest sister and now suspect the Shin family. Shin Qiu was surprised for a moment and looked at Shin Miao. Suddenly there was a sense of powerlessness in his heart. He increasingly felt that he could not have the feeling of being an elder brother in front of Shin Miao. Shin Miao knew everything. Previously when she was stupid, one was afraid that she would be bullied, but now that she was smart, one could not do anything. Seeing that Shin Qiu did not speak, Shin Miao continued, eldest brother is worried about this matter? Younger sister. Shin Qiu said seriously, you are still young and do not understand the matters of the court. Even though this matter looks simple, the slandering person's ambition is not here. If one is not careful, the Shin family will be implicated. He looked at Shin Miao and hesitated for a moment before asking hesitantly, younger sister, do you know about the case of Prince Yu Residence? As soon as the words left his mouth, he immediately answered himself, I think younger sister doesn't know. Younger sister is an unmarried girl, how could I have such great ability? Ever since Shin Miao told Shin Qiu about how the second household and Prince Yu schemed against her, Shin Qiu had not been able to swallow this anger. If it was not that Shin Miao did not allow Shin Qiu to tell her parents and also forced him not to act blindly without thinking, one feared that Shin Qiu would have long gone to take revenge for Shin Miao. From the beginning to the end, Shin Miao had explained to Shin Qiu that she had ways to handle everything. What happened after that was that the second branch seemed to be unlucky and had bad luck. If Shin Qing's pregnancy was discovered during the returning banquet and Shin Miao was the one who facilitated Shin Qing's marriage to Prince Yu Residence, Shin Qiu would already be very surprised. But this time, the entire residence of Prince Yu was exterminated, and if Shin Miao had a part in it, Shin Qiu only felt a chill in his heart. One had to know that to make a residence of a prince disappear silently from this world, even if Shin Xian were to take action, one feared that it would take a lot of effort. Shin Miao was a delicate young lady, how could it be possible? But the more he felt that it was impossible, the more Shin Qiu had an intuition that there was enmity between the residence of Prince Yu and Shin Miao. Now that it had fallen to this stage, what if Shin Miao added fuel to the fire? Shin Miao glanced at Shin Qiu and sighed, eldest brother suspects that I did it. No, no, no. Younger sister, how would I suspect you? You are just a young lady, if you really have this kind of ability, others would laugh their teeth off if it was set out. Shin Qiu quickly retorted, fearing that he would annoy Shin Miao. Chapter 243. When Shin Miao saw his cautious look, Shin Miao sighed in her heart. She could not tell the truth to Shin Qiu. The first household of the Shin family were upright and kind and loyal people. If one knew that such a vicious thing was done by her hands, one's heart would definitely be very painful. She could only lie to Shin Qiu. Shin Miao gently smiled, I indeed do not have this kind of ability. Eldest brother need not doubt me. It is just that the matter that eldest brother is worried about, in fact one need not worry too much. Shin Qiu looked at Shin Miao. Unknowingly, when he faced Shin Miao, there was an additional meaning of inquiry in his conversation. He asked, why does younger sister think so? The people of the world are not fools. How can one be convicted based on a few rumors? If one were to be convicted, one would naturally take out 120,000 evidence. Moreover, what relationship does eldest sister have with our first household? Father and mother are not in the residence all year round, so no matter how dirty water is splashed, it would not reach us. Even if there were 100 chaos in the current situation, it would not be our turn to worry. Naturally there would be smart and capable people to solve all these problems together. Smart and capable people. Shinchio was puzzled, who is that? Before his voice landed, he heard Bai Lu's loud voice from outside, second young master, why are you here? You see. Shin Miao turned back and a smile flashed in her eyes, a smart and capable person is here. Shinchio's eyes turned and in 3 steps he walked to the door and opened it. As expected, he saw Shin Yuan standing at the door. Shin Yuan had always paid attention to his appearance and most likely he was travel-worn after a busy night, he looked somewhat haggard. Compared to the pretense he had in the past few days, the way he looked at Shin Miao and sister was undisguised gloominess. He said, "Fifth younger sister, I have something to speak to you alone." "My younger sister has nothing to say to you." Shin Chio blocked in front of Shin Miao and deliberately emphasized the 3 words "my younger sister." "No harm eldest brother." Shin Miao said, "Coincidentally, I also have a few words to say to second older brother." "Younger sister." Shin Chio said anxiously and almost said, "That thing is not a good person." Shin Miao patted Shin Chio's arm, "Do not worry. If you are not assured, then guard at the door." "Then I'll guard the door," Shin Chio quickly said. The actions of the brother and sister pair made Shin Yuan's face turn even more green. In the past, no matter how much Shin Chio did not like him, he would always put on a friendly front. This time when he came back, it was a tit for tat. Shin Yuan's gaze fell on Shin Miao. Many things would have been fine as long as they followed the established path, but they had deviated from the path to a point where there was no way to end it. It was all because of Shin Miao. She was the biggest variable in the Shin family. "Fifth younger sister, follow me in." Shin Yuan looked coldly at Shin Chio, "Eldest brother, please guard the door." Finishing, he took the lead to step into the room. Under everyone's worried gaze, Shin Miao also walked in. The door was slowly closed and when Shin Miao turned back, she saw Shin Yuan's gloomy expression, "You did it." His tone was very certain and did not even probe. Shin Miao gently smiled, "What matter is second older brother talking about? The matter of the extermination of the entire prince of first-rank residents or the matter of rumors? Which of those were not done by you?" Shin Yuan sneered, "I have finally underestimated you. One fear that second older brother has overestimated me." Shin Miao did not care at all, "I still do not have such great ability to escape unscathed after doing such a disaster." "Oh." Shin Yuan looked her up and down before saying, "You're not very happy now." Chapter 244. The mouth is on other people's body and I do not care what other people say. Since second older brother insists that it is so, I am too lazy to explain as you will not believe it. Could it be that second older brother came over to denounce me? Shin Yuan endured and endured. The young female in front of him had a light smile and her lips hooked up into a ridiculing smile. Her eyes were as clear as water and reflected him in a slightly embarrassed state. He was proud and conceited and now that he was tricked by a girl, his heart was naturally not reconciled. However, since the matter had reached such a stage, he had indeed underestimated the enemy. "Are you not afraid of implicating the Shin family by doing this? In this way, eldest Bo's family would not be able to gain any benefits," Shin Yuan said fiercely. Hearing that, Shin Miao seemed to have heard a funny joke as she looked at Shin Yuan with a smile for a moment until Shin Yuan could no longer endure his anger before she lightly said, "I did not do anything. Moreover, second older brother's words are too strange. Even if this matter is related to the Shin family, what does it have to do with our first household?" She lightly said, "My father, mother and older brother are all in the northwestern region all year round. You cannot say that I, a young lady, can make the decision for the first household. Even if the Shin family is really implicated, second older brother, at least the first household can be pulled out of it." Shin Yuan sucked in a breath of cold air. It was not that he did not think of this later, but when he brought up these words, it was nothing more than seeing that Shen Miao did not understand the matters of the court. No matter how smart and cunning Shen Miao was, she would only be able to be tyrannical in the inner courtyard. But the court was the world of men and Shen Miao was in the Shen residence, so who would analyze the situation of the court? Shen Gui. Shen Wan. Don't make me laugh. But with Shen Miao's sarcastic words, it clearly showed that she understood the situation better than anyone else. So you already have a move. Shen Yuan's expression changed and he sneered, it seems that your first household is not prepared to take action. We never have the leisure to worry about other families' matters. Shen Miao looked at him unruffled, it is second Shu and third Shu that have to explain properly. But the one who is most worried should be second older brother. She shook her head and said with some regret, you just returned to the Ding capital and then encounter such a thing. This is really blocking second older brother's future. She deliberately said it in a cadence. It was probably because she had been with Shen Qiu for a long time that she had learned how to infuriate people without batting an eyelid. This made Shen Yuan so angry that he clenched his fists tighter. Shen Miao suddenly turned her head and touched her soft fur and said with a smile, but seeing that everyone is surnamed Shen, I have an idea that can solve the urgent situation. I don't dare to use fifth younger sister's idea. Shen Yuan stared at her. If I'm not careful, I won't even know it when I lose my life. Second brother must be joking. I'm not that scary. I came up with this idea with all my sincerity. However, with second brother's intelligence, he must have thought of this long ago. Since the Shen family had been implicated, as long as the Shen family could extricate themselves from it, everything would be fine. Actually, second brother also knew that the rumors could not be true, but after a long time, it would inevitably cause suspicion in people's hearts. So at the moment when the rumors just started, it would be better to treat it as a rumor. But to make it become a rumor, one need to let eldest sister clarify it. Shen Miao looked out of the window and saw Shen Qiu hugging his spear nervously as he squatted under the tree, looking into the room from afar. She smiled faintly, I think that the most powerful clarification in this world is to use one's life as the price. You. Shen Yuan suddenly stretched out his fist but stopped at the top of Shen Miao's head. He stared at Shen Miao and said, at your age, to have such a heart of a snake and scorpion. Fifth younger sister, you are the first person that I have seen in my life. Chapter 245. Likewise, likewise. There was a flash of pride in Shen Miao's eyes as she asked, do you think that eldest sister will be willing to clarify for second older brother's future? She smiled gently, one think that she will be willing, after all you are blood related. After pausing, Shen Miao suddenly shook her head, wrong, one think that eldest sister would also not be willing. Eldest sister is a person who treasures herself the most. Second older brother only need to lose his future but eldest sister would have to pay with her life. Shen Miao, you will not be lucky every time. Shen Yuan gritted his teeth and his tone seemed to be itching to skin Shen Miao alive. He suddenly understood why Ren Wanyun would hate Shen Miao so crazily when she mentioned about her. It was because the other party was indeed a person that one hated to the bones. I do not know if I will be lucky every time. Shen Miao looked at him, but second older brother, there is no way out now. With a bang, Shen Yuan kicked the door open and left without even turning his head back. His action made Shen Qiu's heart tighten and he rushed into the room without a second word. Seeing that Shen Miao was safe and sound, he then felt relieved. He asked curiously, what did you say to him? Why was he angered to that extent? Oh, most likely because he felt remorseful seeing his younger sister suffering in prison and was unable to do anything. Shen Miao picked up the cloak from the side without turning her head back. When Shen Qiu saw it, he asked, younger sister is going out? Eldest sister is in prison and as a sister, one must go and take a look. Shen Miao smiled gently, after all, we are siblings. With such a big movement in the Ding capital, it would be strange if the Feng Xian pawnshop did not know about it at all. One fear that if the founder of Bai Shaoshan knew about it, he would come out from his coffin to lecture people. In the Lin Jiang Xian pavilion, Hong Ling placed the exquisite pastries on the table and set the teacups before silently retreating. Ji Yushu picked up a piece of pastry and took a bite before spitting it all out. What is this thing? It tastes terrible. Finishing, he looked at Xie Jingxing, third Xie older brother. Just lend me your chef for a few days. Xie Jingxing gave him a concise scram word. Gao Yang said as he sipped his tea, now that the whole capital is talking about the prince's residence, you still have the mood to eat dessert. Ji Yushu, you are really admirable. There is no need to admire me too much. Ji Yushu smartly straightened his collar. I have always been so outstanding. However, what does the affairs of the prince's mansion have to do with me? Why can't I eat snacks? Don't forget, the premise for the Chen brothers to take action was the news that your Feng Xian pawnshop spread out. Gao Yang reminded, what assassin, rebellion, the news that you created is not small. Ji Yushu exploded when he heard it, the person who created the news is still Shen Miao. One did not see her not eating snacks or sitting restlessly. I heard that she got up early this morning and went to the prison to see Shen Qing. Look, this is what it means to face things calmly with a heart like colored glass. If I were Chen Qing, I would have directly died of anger. Xie Jingxing smiled and picked up a snack to eat. Most likely the taste was not to his liking as he slightly frowned and put down the remaining half and did not take another bite. How can you compare with her? Gao Yang said coldly, one fear that the courage of the fifth Shen young lady is not afraid of anything that can pierce the heavens. One must know that to be able to stab our third Xia older brother's hairpin and still be able to retreat unscathed, this is the first one that I have met. What? Ji Yushu exclaimed and looked at Xie Jingxing, third older brother, you were actually stabbed. Xie Jingxing glanced at Gao Yang, do you want to go back? Gao Yang immediately sat upright, just now I was speaking nonsense. Chapter 246. But Ji Yushu apparently discovered a new interesting matter and kept asking Xie Jingxing, how did she stab you? With a sword. Third older brother, you did not evade, so her actions must be very fast. Finally she escaped unscathed. Heavens! Third older brother, you cannot beat her. Xie Jingxing finally could not bear it any longer, shut up. Her skills are so good and her looks are also not bad. I suddenly feel that young lady Xiao Yao cannot be compared to her. Ah! Third older brother Xie, can you help me think of a way to please her? I feel that it is better to settle this kind of young lady at home. Ji Yushu continued to nag. One more sentence and you and Gao Yang will go back together. Xie Jingxing said expressionlessly. Ji Yushu finally bitterly shut his mouth. Gao Yang waved his fan and diverted the topic, but with such a big move, why do I feel that the matter of the Prince of First-Rank residence is not over yet? Not over yet. Ji Yushu said, the people are all dead, why is it not over yet? But speaking of this, I also feel that it is a little strange. Why would young lady Shen let people spread such rumors without rhyme or reason? Is she not afraid of implicating the entire Shen family? Others are rushing to draw a clear line of relations, so why would she still find trouble for herself? Have you seen a fisherman who would not fish after catching a big fish? Xie Jingxing swept a glance at him and smiled with some interest, it was originally one ring after another. Her plans were never to end in the residence of the Prince of First Rank. At the other end in Kai Yun Yuan of the Shen residence, Shen Yuan dragged his heavy footsteps back to the room. When Ren Wanyun saw him, she pounced over and asked hopefully, Yuaner, how is it? Shen Yuan shook his head, it is somewhat difficult. Yuaner, you must save Qing'er. Ren Wanyun's tears suddenly flowed down. These days she had been washing her face with tears every day and her eyes were so swollen that it was somewhat scary. She did not even tidy herself up and there was a strange smell coming from her body. Shen Yuan quietly moved away a little and was caught off guard by Ren Wanyun's hand. Ren Wanyun said, she is your younger sister, you must save her. Qing'er is very pitiful. She is innocent and she must be very scared when she was caught. We are not by her side, so only you as an older brother can save her. As she spoke, her tears mixed with saliva sprayed onto Shen Yuan's body. Shen Yuan's heart was already vexed, and seeing Ren Wanyun's attitude, it deepened the frustration in his heart. He said, I know. He turned around and was about to return to his room. Ren Wanyun became anxious when she saw this and pulled Shen Yuan. Yuaner, why did you return to the room? Shouldn't you be going to the Yamen to make arrangements? If that doesn't work, then beg the emperor. You're so smart and know many people in court. I'm sure you'll be able to speak up for your sister. Do you need money? Mother will go get it for you. Mother, Shen Yuan suppressed the irritation in his heart and said, at the moment, I cannot help with the Yamen. Do not mess around. I am messing around. Ren Wanyun was surprised for a moment before she screamed, I am saving your younger sister. There was not a single good person in this manner. Your father has no conscience. He only knows how to fool around with that vixen all day long. How could he care about the life and death of us mother and daughter? Are you going to ignore your sister now? Are you going to learn from your father? I have endured hardships to raise you up, and this is how you repay me. Shen Yuan, your father has no conscience. You are a little heartless. The more Ren Wanyun spoke, the louder her voice became. Now she was a little crazy and could not withstand the stimulation. One did not know where did Shen Yuan's words touched her that she started to act like a lunatic. Not only scolding, Ren Wanyun even pushed Shen Yuan. She was scolding and there was no trace of the dignified and wealthy Furen that she used to have. She looked like a crazy woman from a small family. Shen Yuan suddenly felt somewhat tired. Shen Miao's words reverberated in his ears. He originally had a great future, and now that he was back in the capital, it was the beginning of his meteoric rise. He would choose a wise ruler to assist and eventually become a famous prime minister of a generation and trample everyone under his feet. Everyone would look up to him. But now what was this? His mother had become a shrew, his father was a yes-man and could not be of much use. Even his younger sister, who could have added flowers to the brocade of his career, had become a prisoner. All of these had become his stumbling blocks. Although blood and flesh were important, wasn't his bright future also important? He had secretly become Fu Xiuyi's person for many years and took up posts outside just to make plans for his return to the capital. Who knew that such a thing would happen? What Shen Miao said was right. Rumors were rumors in the past and should not be taken seriously, but if it was spread too ferociously and was heard by the Tian family's ears and heart, no matter how much Fu Xiuyi valued him, he would not dare to touch him because of fear. Shen Miao had placed two roads in front of him. One was blood and the other was his future. However, from a certain point of view, he really had nowhere to go. Shen Yuan looked at Ren Wanyun and calmly said, even if mother does not care about me, could it be that she would not care about younger brother's life? Chapter 247. Even if mother does not care about me, could it be that one would not care about younger brother's life? When the calm words sounded, Ren Wanyun's scolding suddenly stopped. She looked blankly at Shen Yuan. What did you say? Now that the entire Shen residence is implicated, the first to bear the brunt is our second household. Younger sister's matter has many implications, and even if father and I lose our official positions, mother would not care, but if it implicates younger brother, could it be that mother would not care? Shen Yuan said. Ren Wanyun looked at him and for a moment her expression was somewhat flustered. What does this have to do with Boer? Boer is still so young, how could he be involved in these matters? No one is more innocent than Boer. Mother, everyone is innocent in this matter. Shen Yuan sneered, could it be that I am not innocent? Enduring it, he continued, Mother, when the rumors are getting more and more intense, if the Shen family were to go and provoke things at this time, one fear that the entire residence would suffer. He looked at Ren Wanyun and said in a deep voice, even if mother has the thought of perishing together with others, could it be that younger brother would be thrown in for nothing? Ren Wanyun's body trembled and started to tremble uncontrollably. One had to know that she indeed harbored such thoughts. Even though she hated Shin Miao, but the coldness of the entire Shin residence, Shin Gui's heartlessness, old Shin Furin's sway with the wind and the third household's cold eyes had already made Ren Wanyun bear a huge grievance against the Shin residence. She even thought that it did not matter even if the entire Shin residence was implicated because of Shin Qing, if she could drag the first household to die together, it would be considered as revenge. But Shin Yuan had pointed out one thing, and that was if the Shin residence really suffered a calamity, even Shin Yuan Bo would not be able to avoid it. Since ancient times, the emperor loved the eldest son and the commoners loved the youngest. Shin Yuan was intelligent since young, so Ren Wanyun did not worry much about him, but it was Shin Yuan Bo who was young and mischievous that Ren Wanyun doted on him. If Shin Yuan Bo were to lose his life, she would not be willing to see it no matter what. Then, Yuaner, what should we do? Ren Wanyun looked at Shin Yuan and there was no trace of the craziness left, as if Shin Yuan was her life-saving straw and her backbone. Mother, one cannot be greedy. Shin Yuan looked at her with a cruel gaze. You can only protect one of younger sister and younger brother. In the prison near the Ding capital's Yamen, there were prison guards standing outside. In the case of the extermination of Prince Yu's household, Shin Qing was in a very awkward position. On the surface, she seemed to be a pitiful person. As soon as she married into the Wang Fu, her family encountered a massacre. Fortunately, she was lucky enough to keep her life. However, if one delved deeper into the case, there were many doubtful points. Perhaps it was related to Shin Qing. Even if it had nothing to do with her, there were all kinds of erotic conjectures and rumors about Shin Qing cursing her husband. It was enough to make her name the focus of everyone's discussion on the streets and alleys. From this point of view, it would have been better for them to have died cleanly in that case. Emperor Wen Hui's attitude towards the case of Prince Yu residence was also thought-provoking. He said that he wanted people to investigate immediately but threw the matter to the administrator of the capital and the Yamen, and did not even ask about it. With Emperor Wen Hui's brotherly affection towards Prince Yu of the first rank, it was not possible to let it go so easily. The Son of Heaven's mind had always been hard to guess, and the officials below were also unable to guess what Emperor Wen Hui wanted to do, so they could only put Shin Qing in prison to await trial. This was actually a little comical. The only woman who survived the massacre was unarmed, yet she was treated as the main culprit. The matters of the world were sometimes so strange. When Shin Miao came to the prison door, the head jailer was surprised for a moment when he saw her and went forward. Who is it? Chapter 248. My young lady is the fifth young lady of the general residence's Shin family. Jing Zhi took a step forward and stuffed the sachet containing the silver anklets into the hands of the head jailer. One specially came over to take a look at eldest young lady. Shin Miao took out the token that Shin Qiu gave her from her sleeves and waved it in front of the head jailer. When that person saw it, he quickly bowed respectfully. So it is fifth Shin young lady. Shin Xian's name was well known in the Ding capital, not to mention the head jailer, even the officials would have to give some face to her. I want to go and take a look at eldest sister. Trouble Darren to lead the way. Shin Miao said. That head jailer smiled. Originally these few days no one is allowed to visit, but since fifth Shin young lady has spoken, then follow this lowly one. Finishing, he gave a few instructions to the jailer outside. Jing Zhi and Gu Yu stayed outside and brought Shin Miao in. Now Shin Qing's identity was very awkward and no one knew if there would be a chance to get rid of her crimes in the future. But even if she really got rid of her crimes, it would be extremely difficult for Shin Qing to live with that kind of reputation. Actually, fifth young lady need not be too worried. The head jailer smiled. Even though eldest Shin young lady is still in prison, once the matter comes to light, eldest Shin young lady would not be implicated. He thought that since Shin Miao came to visit Shin Qing, the two sisters should have a very close relationship. No matter what, if Shin Miao was comfortable, it would be considered as selling a favor to Shin Xian. Shin Miao nodded her head, many thanks to Darren's guidance. When a stone staircase appeared in front, the head jailer stopped and said, "Eldest Shin young lady is imprisoned below. Fifth young lady go down and talk to her. My subordinates and I will wait outside. Do not speak for too long." Shin Miao thanked him again, and after the head jailer and the few jailers deliberately avoided her, she then walked down the stairs. Walking down the long stairs, at the end was a prison cell. There was an iron fence surrounding it and there was only a small fist-sized window in the cell. This was the place where major criminals were locked up. There was a row of torches on the stone wall, but the torches were swaying in the gloomy prison cell, making it look somewhat strange. The cell was covered with straw, and on top of it was a dirty quilt. The quilt was probably infested with lice, and some small black material could be vaguely seen. The person wrapped in the quilt was sitting on the straw with his head buried in his knees. It was unknown whether he was asleep or not. Shin Miao quietly looked for a long time before walking over and stretched out her hand to knock a few times on the iron fence. The man who buried his head in his knees jerked his head up, revealing a slightly frightened face. When he saw clearly that it was Shin Miao, his frightened expression turned into anger as he gritted his teeth and shouted, "Shin Miao! It's me!" Shin Miao took a step back to avoid Shin Qing pouncing on her and scratching her. Her guess was right. The next moment, Shin Qing pounced on Shin Miao. Her hands reached over the iron fence in an attempt to catch Shin Miao, but she could only wave her arms in vain because of the fence. "Looks like you still haven't learned your lesson." Shin Miao laughed and looked at her calmly, "Don't waste your energy. It is useless." Shin Qing hatefully put down her hand and suddenly burst into laughter. "Shin Miao, are you here to demonstrate to me? Are you here to see how miserable I am? Let me tell you, there will be a day when you will be 100 times more miserable than me." "What a pity." Shin Miao looked at her pitifully. "Even if there is such a day, you will not be able to see it." Shin Qing was surprised for a moment and a trace of fear suddenly appeared in her eyes. She had been locked up in this prison for a few days and even she herself did not know what was going on. She had always been pampered and thought that the night in Wulong Temple with Prince Yu was the most painful moment in her life. She did not expect that the grievous news that followed was more and more frightening. Pregnancy, returning banquet, marriage and the bloody massacre on the night of marriage. Now she was actually a prisoner. She resisted the uneasiness in her heart and stubbornly said, "Don't think of lying to me. This matter has nothing to do with me at all. Don't tell me that it will implicate me." Chapter 249. Why can't you understand? Shin Miao squatted down and looked at Shin Qing who was in the cell. She was like an adult looking at an ignorant child and gently shook her head. "The entire Prince Yu residence was exterminated and only you survived. No matter if it was a conspiracy or not, no matter if you have any relation with the murderer, as long as you are alive, you will become a great sin." "What relation can I have with the murderer?" Shin Qing retorted, "Why would I want to exterminate the entire Prince Yu residence? I have no grievances or hatred with him, even if there is. It is you." Her words suddenly stopped halfway as she looked at Shin Miao in disbelief. "It was you who did it?" Shin Miao's lips slightly curled up. "It was you who did it." Shin Qing suddenly grabbed the railing of the iron fence and looked at Shin Miao. "It is you. You and Prince Yu of the first rank have a deep enmity and it was you who let people exterminate his entire family. You deliberately left me alive so that I would be the scapegoat for you. Shin Miao, you have a good scheme." She looked at Shin Miao and her heart was shocked and angry. She was shocked that Shin Miao was so sinister and angry that she had fallen to such a state and it was all because of Shin Miao. "Eldest sister, one must produce evidence for everything." Shin Miao smiled gently, "But from your words just now, it seems that you have become smarter after staying in prison for 2 days." Even though she denied Shin Qing's words, but in Shin Qing's eyes, Shin Miao had admitted to the crimes that she committed. Shin Qing was furious. "What do you want to do?" "Shin Miao, you will not succeed. My father and older brother will definitely save me. They will find evidence, and at the end the one sitting in prison will be you and not me. At that time, I will definitely think of ways to hack you into 1,000 pieces. You are still counting on Second Shu and Xin Yuan. Shen Miao ridiculed. Second Shu is now afraid of being implicated and did not even come to see you. As for Xin Yuan, Shen Miao smiled. He could have a good career and a limitless future, but because of you, there are endless troubles. Do you really think that he would want to save you? Shen Qing glared at Shen Miao, but in her heart she knew that what Shen Miao said was not wrong at all. How would she not know what kind of character Shen Gui had? As early as when Shen Gui married her to Prince Yu of the first rank, Shen Qing could see clearly that Shen Gui was the same as old Shen Furen and would only seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. As for her second brother, who had been somewhat unpredictable since young, although he had helped her solve many problems in the past, this time, it affected Xin Yuan's career. Would Xin Yuan really help her? Shen Miao, stop talking nonsense. Despite the uneasiness in her heart, Chen Qing still forced herself to say, my mother won't just stand by and watch. My mother will definitely find a way to save me. As long as my mother appears, with second brother's ability, it won't be difficult to find out the truth. At that time, the unlucky ones will be you. Second aunt? Shen Miao sighed. I know that Second Shen treats you very well and you are Second Shen's eyes. If anything bad happens to you, Second Shen will definitely risk her life to protect you, just like how she treated me in the beginning. Only then did Shen Qing's restless mood ease a little, and she also felt somewhat pleased with herself. Ren Wanyun had always indulged her, and among the 3D daughters in the Shen residence, Chen Roqiu was slightly stricter towards Shen Yu, and Luo Shuiyan was rarely together with Shen Miao. Only Ren Wanyun was 100 times more indulgent towards Shen Qing. It was because when Shen Qing was born, Ren Wanyun had a difficult birth and it was not easy for both mother and daughter to be safe, thus Ren Wanyun was very attentive towards this daughter. Even when Shen Qing wanted to fight for Prince Ding, Fu Xiu-yi, Ren Wanyun did not say anything bad about it. Now even if others were indifferent to her, as long as Ren Wanyun was around, she would definitely not allow her to be wronged. Shen Qing's proud smile had yet to rise when she heard Shen Miao's laughing voice, but eldest sister, make a guess. Between you and seventh younger brother, who is better in Second Shen's heart? Chapter 250. Shen Qing was startled and stared at Shen Miao without speaking. Shen Miao looked at her gently. Everyone in the residence knows how much Second Shen dotes on seventh younger brother. If seventh younger brother is to be lost because of you, do you think Second Shen would be willing to take this risk? In fact, I am also looking forward to know the answer. One do not know if eldest sister can answer it for me. Shen Qing's body started to tremble violently. She was clearer than anyone else about Shen Yuanbo's position in Ren Wanyun's heart. With Ren Wanyun's current age, Shen Yuanbo was naturally very precious. In addition, even though Shen Yuanbo was mischievous, he was also very likable. The most important thing was that Shen Yuanbo was a son. In this world, it was not easy for females, and in Ren Wanyun's heart, she was always more biased towards her youngest son. If Shen Yuanbo was to be sacrificed for her, Shen Qing was well aware of the answer. She would be the one to be abandoned. But no matter how fearful her heart was, facing Shen Miao, Shen Qing was not willing to show any weakness. She looked at Shen Miao and sneered, what do you want to say? Could it be that you want to say that no matter what I will die? Shen Miao, do not forget that I still have the imperial flesh and blood in my stomach. The child in my stomach has the blood of the imperial family. Even if it is for him, I will definitely not make any mistakes. After saying this, Shen Qing stroked her stomach and showed a loving smile. This really made one somewhat stunned. After all, a few days ago, she was still beating her stomach and wished that this illegitimate child was not there. Eldest sister, do you really think that he is your life-saving talisman? Shen Miao's fluttering eyes landed on Shen Qing's slightly bulging stomach and lightly said, if it was in the past, with His Majesty's importance to Prince Yu, naturally one would want to keep this child. But now, one fear that it will become your life-saving talisman. What do you mean? Shen Qing did not understand what Shen Miao was saying, but from Shen Miao's determined gaze, there was a sudden fear in her heart. Her intuition told her that Shen Miao was not biased towards her, but why would the child in her stomach become her life-saving talisman? Naturally, Shen Qing did not know that some rumors were circulating in the palace and had reached the emperor's ears, thus some things had quietly changed. If it was in the past, in order to protect Prince Yu's flesh and blood, Emperor Wenhui naturally would not let Shen Qing be buried with him so early. But now, once the seed of doubt arose, the emperor would be cruel and merciless. It was likely that he wished he could cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, so that he could send Shen Qing and the vile spawn in her belly to hell as soon as possible. Seeing Shen Miao smiling without saying a word, Shen Qing became even more flustered. She snapped, Shen Miao, I have no enmity with you. Why are you trying to harm me? No grudges. Shen Miao seemed to have heard a funny joke as she looked at Shen Qing. When you mother and daughter schemed against me, did you ever think that there was no grievance or hatred? You. Shen Qing was unwilling in her heart. She looked at Shen Miao as if she was looking at a terrifying person. She said, you have harmed me. You will not have a good death. One day, your first branch will also become stray dogs, trampled by others, and all of you will die a horrible death. At the end, her voice suddenly became sharp, as if she could only use such a method to hide the fear in her heart. But in the midst of her abuse, Shen Miao's expression did not change. She whispered, the saying one's fortune will change is not false, but to wait for the heavens to change, one fear that it would be too difficult. In this world, the plan lies with the people. Fortunately, everything was not in vain. Shen Qing's so-called horrible death was something that she had already tasted in her previous life. At that time, Luo Shuayan had already passed away, Shen Qiu was drowned, and in the first branch of the Shen family, Shen Xian and all the servants were thrown into prison. Listening to the rumors from the little eunuchs in the cold palace, Shen Xian was squatting in the most terrifying prison. Iron chains were pierced through his shoulder blades to prevent him from escaping, and his cheeks were branded with the word prisoner. For a general who was decisive in killing on the battlefield, this was undoubtedly the most unacceptable. If one were to say that the physical torture was still bearable, then the mental humiliation was the most painful part for Shen Xian. And at that time, she was locked in the cold palace and watched as Fu Ming was pushed down from the crown prince position, and Mei Furen was immensely pleased with herself. Chapter 251. Shen Qing was already somewhat confused. She was after all young and had not experienced much, and Ren Wanyun had always pampered her as she grew up. Once something happened, the way to bear it would be very, very low. She screamed, Shen Miao, you are not a human. You will not die a good death. Shen Miao quietly looked at her, Shen Qing, how does it feel to see one's hopes being shattered one by one? Shen Qing stared at Shen Miao with hatred. When I was at the end of my road, you once sent me off, so this time, I will send you off the last road. She said with a smile, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. Her clear-as-water eyes were rippling like black clouds that shrouded the other party. In the previous life, before she died, she saw Shen Qing and Shen Yu standing behind Mei Furen with a charming smile. The second and third households' contributions could not go unnoticed for the first household of the Shen family to end up with a miserable ending. She walked this difficult life again so that she could pull out the fangs of the poisonous snake one by one and then slowly torture them. Shen Qing did not understand her words and only bitterly gritted her teeth. Shen Miao, you will not die a good death. Shen Miao stood up and looked down at Shen Qing from above. That slightly immature face in the gloomy prison showed a kind of majesty and magnificence that could not be looked at directly. And in that majesty, there was a faint black storm that eventually turned into a sneer on her lips. The purple skirt fluttered in front of the prison and that figure gradually disappeared. The last sentence that Shen Qing heard was, Shen Miao said, Shen Qing, you are the first. In the eastern courtyard of the Shen residence, there was an unusual silence on this day. Shen Gui stayed in the room with a gloomy expression on his face. Today he heard from the eunuch in the palace that Shen Qing's matter was really not easy to handle. Most likely there was a problem between Emperor Wen Hui and Prince Yu, and this problem was obviously more serious than what the courtiers guessed. At the moment it was a dilemma. If he were to manage Shen Qing's matter, one feared that Emperor Wen Hui would be unhappy, and if he did not care about Shen Qing, the rumors would spread more, and when there was trouble, the first person to look for would be him. He was sighing here, and Wan Yinyang walked over to his side and gently massaged his shoulders. Shen Gui was lustful and had many concubines in his residence, but Ren Wanyun was strict, and those concubines were not able to give birth to any sons or daughters for him. Even if they were lucky enough to give birth, they would die very quickly. It was this Wan Yinyang who gave birth to a daughter, Shen Dongling, under Ren Wanyun's eyelids, and even raised her up to this age, which was enough to see her ability. At the beginning the servants in the residence all spread that if Wan Yinyang did not give birth to a daughter but a son, one feared that her status would be able to compete with Ren Wanyun. Wan Yinyang and old Shen Furen were both singers, and Ren Wanyun looked down on her, and old Shen Furen also felt that this identity was somewhat irritating. But Wan Yinyang was indeed a famous actress and was the pillar of the troupe. She was also charming and affectionate, and when she acted as a Hua Dan, there was no need to mention how beautiful she was. Ever since Shen Dongling was born, Wan Yinyang had been staying in her own small courtyard, as if she had disappeared from everyone's eyes. Even that weak and sickly Shen Dongling also did not leave the courtyard all year round, and only came out to meet people during the new year, and was almost thrown to the back of people's minds. Now that something happened to Shen Qing and old Shen Furen was not happy, Ren Wanyun and Shen Gui would quarrel whenever they meet, and this Wan Yinyang made a comeback. These days, she had served Shen Gui comfortably, and when she looked at Ren Wanyun and her daughter again, there was an unspeakable disgust. Master is still worried about eldest young lady's matter. Wan Yinyang was massaging Shen Gui's shoulders as she persuaded, Master need not be too worried. Since eldest young lady did not do that matter, there will be a day when the truth will come to light. Chapter 252. AI. Shen Gui sighed, no matter if she does it or not, this matter is not that simple. This time Qing will implicate everyone. When Wan Yinyang heard it, she said worriedly, even so, there is always a black and white principle in this world. She said, this concubine and third young lady do not have anything as long as they follow master, life and death do not matter. But second young master's career is good, and there is also seventh young master who is still so young. If he is implicated, what can be done? Shen Gui's expression changed and his heart was somewhat irritated. Even though he was selfish, greedy and lustful in his bones, but towards his two sons, he still had great hopes. One did not know what was going on, but when it came to their generation in the Shen residence, there were not many children. And they had two sons in one household, which was something that made Shen Gui extremely proud. To a daughter, in Shen Gui's eyes, it was just an item that could be exchanged for benefits, but to a son, it was a treasure that could carry on the ancestral line. Now because of Shen Qing's daughter, he had to compensate his own pair of sons. Shen Gui felt stuffy when he thought about it. This concubine heard that Furen is currently running around for eldest young lady. It is really pitiful for a parent's heart. If it was not that this concubine is small and weak, one really hope that I can be of some help. Wan Yinyang continued. What help? When Shen Gui heard Wan Yinyang mention Ren Wanyun, he felt even more annoyed and said, it is all because of that crazy woman who taught such a shameless good daughter and now even implicate everyone. Don't know what it means. Wan Yinyang seemed to be frightened as she abruptly shrank back, and the hand that was pressing on his shoulder also stopped. After pausing for a moment, she then said softly, Master must not blame Furen. Such a big matter had happened and Furen's heart is also not feeling well. If eldest young lady were to think wrongly in prison and do something irrational, how sad would Furin be? Shingui said impatiently, what can she do? His voice suddenly paused and Shingui slowly said, irrational things. Wan Yinyang's eyes flashed but her voice was filled with worry, a young lady who just married over and such a thing happened and was locked up in prison. Eldest young lady has been pampered since young, so it is very possible that she would not be able to think it through. It's better to send someone to persuade him not to do anything stupid. Shingui suddenly stood up and looked outside. The sun was about to set in the west. The sky darkened especially early in winter. He said, I'm going out for a while. It is so late, where is master going? Wan Yinyang asked. I have something to do. You can have dinner by yourself. Shingui strode out. When Shingui's figure could no longer be seen, Wan Yinyang then closed the door and walked to the table to sit down. There was a dazzling array of dishes on the table. When the east courtyard was filled with gloom, her food was exquisite. But who knew that a few years ago when she was eating moldy steamed buns and rotten porridge, she was harmed by Ren Wanyun to the point that she could not even gather money for Shin Dongling's medical fees. What was she thinking at that time? In the past she was unlucky, but now it was Ren Wanyun and her daughter's turn to be unlucky. Ren Wanyun caused her daughter to be so careful even though she was a Shu daughter for so many years and did not even have the chance to leave the courtyard. Now that Shin Qing was in prison, one feared that she would be more miserable than Shin Dongling in the past for the rest of her life. Go and call third young lady over to eat. She instructed the maid by her side and the maid left. Yinyang, will master really take action against eldest young lady? Another maid asked carefully. Of course. Wan Yinyang smiled charmingly, he definitely will. After being husband and wife with Shingui for so many years, she knew better than anyone what Shingui was thinking in his heart. Just now she deliberately reminded him just to remind Shingui of some things. If Ren Wanyun knew that her own daughter was finally settled by her own husband, one did not know how carefree it would be. She scooped up a spoonful of soup and slowly tasted it. At the same time, Shin Yuan, who was in Kai Yun Yuan, also put on a cloak and without greeting anyone, he walked out of the Shin residence's main doors. Chapter 253. The night gradually darkened and the winter nights were always exceptionally cold. If one were to walk outside, the north wind seemed to be able to blow into the seams of one's bones, making one feel pain even if one moved. In the gloomy prison, the wind blew in through the narrow window, making the people in the prison to shrink into a ball. She wrapped the tattered quilt tightly around her body and only her head was exposed. She got up with great effort and tried to close the window that the wind blew in. However, she could not reach it even when she tiptoed. After a moment, she gave up this idea, fearing that if she used too much strength, it would only make herself weaker. When the patrolling jailer saw this scene, he only smiled at this scene and did not step forward to help. After staying in this kind of gloomy place for a long time, one would more or less be somewhat distorted. Most likely it was a kind of pleasure to watch the prisoners suffer, at least for now. Shen Qing glanced at the jailer and quickly lowered her head to hide the trace of hatred in her eyes. After being here for a few days, she had suffered all the hardships that she should have suffered. She did not know if it was because Shin Yuan and Shin Gui did not manage to bribe them, but these jailers did not treat her any different from others and also made fun of her suffering. If there was anything that was deliberately taken care of, it would be that she was not like the other female prisoners who had her innocence destroyed by these jailers. However, perhaps this was not the credit of the Shin family, after all she was still carrying Prince Yu's flesh and blood in her stomach. No matter if her background was glorious or not, she was after all stained with a little royal blood. Shin Qing carefully touched her lower abdomen. Now this was the only thing that she could rely on. She did not know why, but the words that Shin Miao said to her in the afternoon made her feel an extreme fear. This was something that she had never had before. Even when she was first brought to the prison, she did not have such thoughts because she knew that there would always be someone who would come to save her and her loved ones would not let her suffer in vain. But Shin Miao had analyzed it word by word for her, shattering her hopes one by one, allowing Shin Qing to see clearly how weak she was. It also made Shin Qing doubt if she could escape unscathed this time. The jailer glanced at her and was about to walk out again when Shin Qing suddenly called out, "Big brother." The other party stopped and walked over to her. Probably because he couldn't stand the strange smell on Shin Qing's body, he waved his hand in disgust and asked, "What's the matter? In the past few days, has my family come to see me? Or did you pass a message to me?" She held back her anger. A little jailer actually dared to look at her with such a look of disdain. If it was in the past, she was afraid that he wouldn't even have enough time to curry favor with her. These despicable people who fawn on those in power. The jailer laughed. "What are you thinking, Miss Shen? The case hasn't been solved yet, who would dare to see you? Besides, apart from that younger sister of yours, no one else in your family has asked about you," the jailer said in a mocking tone. After all, such a thing happened to Shin Qing. Even if she was able to clear her name in the future, she would still have to bear the burden of many gossips. Moreover, the Shin family would also fall into such a predicament and it would be very difficult for them to pass their days. Presumably the Shin family had decided to give up this daughter. Thinking of this, the jailer's attitude towards Shin Qing became even more impolite. Shin Qing's heart did not know if she was disappointed or relaxed. After hesitating for a moment, she then looked at the jailer and said, "Big brother, if my older brother comes to see me, you can say that I have heavy thoughts and do not wish to see others. How about not letting him see me?" As she spoke, she took off a bracelet from her wrist and handed it over through the iron bars. When she was in prison, most of the jewelry on her body had been taken away. This bracelet was worn by Ren Wanyun on the day of her marriage and was also very precious. Shin Qing kept a selfish motive and did not take this thing out. Thinking about it, she was forced to give the bracelet out today. Chapter 254. When the jailer saw the bracelet, his eyes lit up and he snatched the bracelet away and looked at it carefully under the light. Seeing that the color was not bad, he then said with a smile, "Since you said so, I will help you. But it is a good thing that your older brother came to see you, why do you still push him out?" Shin Qing forced a smile and said, "Because of me, the residence is in trouble. One really feel apologetic and do not have the face to see them." The jailer nodded his head but there was some contempt in his eyes. If she was really such a self-respecting female, how would she commit adultery behind her family's back and even get pregnant before marriage? Now saying that she felt apologetic and did not have the face to see others was really putting on an act. But the jailer did not have any reason to refuse and left after accepting the matter. After the jailer walked far away, Shin Qing then squatted down and helplessly hugged her shoulders and buried her head in her knees. Now she often did this action because she did not know if what she was doing was right or wrong and did not know where the road ahead was. She could only not look or think, as if when she opened her eyes again, she would be able to return to the time when she was the eldest young lady of the Shin family. She did not know how long she slept in a daze until she heard someone knocking on the iron bars. She then raised her head in a daze. In the flickering light, a familiar face was reflected. If it was in the past, she would have been overjoyed to see this face, but after Shin Miao's words, Shin Qing was so scared that she fell to the ground and looked at the person in front of her in a panic. Shin Yuan said, "Is younger sister doing well? Second older brother, why are you here?" Shin Qing asked as she quietly took a step back. Shin Yuan saw her action and frowned slightly but did not say anything. He took out a key from his sleeves and opened the cell door. Shin Qing was surprised for a moment when she saw it and immediately stood up with joy. "Second older brother, are you here to save me out?" Shin Yuan shook his head, temporarily unable to save you. He took out a bag of snacks and handed it to Shin Qing. "Come over to see you and get you something to eat." Shin Qing was somewhat disappointed. Shen Yuan had already walked in and seemed to feel that the prison was somewhat dirty. He had a somewhat disgusted look on his face. When Shen Qing saw this, she felt somewhat sad in her heart. She subconsciously took the oiled paper bag from Shen Yuan's hands and opened it. In the oiled paper bag, there was a fragrant pastry that was still steaming. It was her favorite chestnut cake in the past. "You have suffered these days," Shen Yuan said with a rare gentleness. "I know you love to eat this, so I brought it to you to satisfy your craving." Shen Qing's nose turned sour and she almost shed tears. These days, she had been eating spoiled food in the prison and was still not full. Every day, she lived in fear and anxiety. Now that she saw her old love and Shen Yuan was coincidentally by her side, all the grievances in her heart gushed out. "Don't cry. After you finish eating, wait a few days and I'll save you," Shen Yuan said gently. Shen Qing somewhat awkwardly took out a piece of pastry and was about to send it to her mouth when she saw Shen Yuan's gentle smile. Her hands suddenly trembled, as if a basin of cold water was poured over her head. Inexplicably, Shen Miao's words from the afternoon reverberated in her ears. "He could have a good career and a limitless future, but because of you, there were endless troubles. Do you really think that he would want to come and save you?" The pastry was close to her mouth but Shen Qing could not bite it no matter what. The most important thing in the relationship between people was trust. If it was in the past, Shen Qing would definitely choose to trust Shen Yuan without hesitation. But ever since the matter of Prince Yu, Shen Qing had personally witnessed the coldness of the Shen family. Was this second older brother really willing to give up his good career and take such a big risk to save her? If it was Shen Qing herself, she would also be somewhat hesitant. Shen Qing suddenly remembered the jade bracelet that she used to beat the jailer. At that time, she said that if Shen Yuan came over to see her, she must stop him. But what was the matter with Shen Yuan appearing now? Was it that jailer who took her things but did not do anything, or Shen Yuan simply used other ways to come in? Chapter 255. At this time, Shen Qing suddenly discovered that none of the prison guards who were patrolling in the prison had appeared. And there were no other prisoners in the cell that she was locked up in. That was to say, there was only her and Shen Yuan here at the moment. They were originally the most intimate siblings, but it made her feel a chill down her spine. "Why are you not eating?" Shen Yuan asked her. Shen Qing forced a smile and was quick-witted. I cannot bear to. Leave it for later. It will not taste good when it is cold." Shen Yuan smiled. "I will send it to you again in a few days." "No." Shen Qing declined. I do not want to eat now." "Were you not very hungry just now?" Shen Yuan looked at her. "Why do you suddenly not want to eat?" Shen Qing waved her hands in panic. "I just do not want to eat. Suddenly I feel somewhat uncomfortable. Most likely it is because of my body that the things I eat are occasionally strange." She wrapped the pastry in a paper bag and placed it at the side. "Wait till I feel comfortable and will definitely eat it." Shen Yuan silently looked at her actions and his eyes were dark, but he finally sneered. Younger sister seemed to have become smarter after staying in prison for a few days. His voice no longer had the gentleness from before, but instead there was an inexplicable cruelty. Shen Yuan said, "It seems that you already know. It is a pity, as one originally wanted to let younger sister go more easily." Shen Qing's body suddenly started to tremble as she looked at Shen Yuan. "Second older brother, what do you mean by this? Younger sister is so guarded against me, and I thought that you already understood my meaning. Even if you are not willing to eat the pastry, then forget it. Even though you have let down older brother's painstaking efforts, but seeing that you are pregnant now, second older brother will not haggle with you." Shen Yuan's words were very calm and matched with his slightly refined face. There was a kind of power that made one fearful. Shen Qing seemed to be aware of something and suddenly shook her head frantically and wanted to shout, but before she could make a sound, her throat was grabbed by someone. How could a person who usually looked so refined have such great strength? What was even more frightening was that his subordinate was his own twin sister, yet he did not hesitate or pity her at all. It was as if he was looking at a passerby. Shin Qing's eyes widened from being strangled as she stared fixedly at the person in front of her. Shen Yuan chuckled softly and said, "Younger sister must not blame second older brother for being ruthless. Now that you have caused such a big disaster, you will implicate the entire Shen family if you are not careful." Could it be that for the sake of his younger sister, his parents, and even Yuan Bo would have to pay with their lives? "Sister, you can't be too selfish." Shin Qing struggled with all her might. However, she was a woman and a pregnant woman at that. Moreover, she had been tortured to the point of being on the verge of death. How could her strength surpass that of a man of his age? She could only kick her legs in vain, and even the straw on the ground was kicked everywhere. "I know you're not satisfied." Shen Yuan said softly, "Younger sister originally had nothing to do with this matter, but now she has to pay with her life because of this. I am your second brother. I will definitely avenge you. Second older brother will guarantee you that the first household of the Shen family and Shen Miao's ending will be thousands of times more miserable than yours. So younger sister must not hate second older brother. Only when you die, the second household will not be implicated and second older brother's career will be proud. Only then can I help you take revenge. Do you understand?" Shen Qing's body gradually went limp and her eyes started to lose their spirit. It was as if she was a dying fish that was gradually drying up on the dry shore. Shen Yuan released his hand and the body under his hand fell to the ground with a plop sound. In just a short period of time, he had turned from a lively dragon and a lively tiger to a completely silent one. Shen Qing's life was now in prison. Chapter 256. Shen Yuan said faintly as he looked at Shen Qing's body. After a moment, he used a needle to prick Shen Qing's fingertip and grabbed Shen Qing's hand to write a line of blood words on the stone wall of the prison cell. Following that, he pulled out Shen Qing's belt and tied a knot on the bars before putting it on Shen Qing's head. After everything was done, he then stood up and picked up the oiled paper bag that Shen Qing placed on the ground before taking one last look at the slightly swaying figure on the iron bars. "Younger sister, you will not die in vain. Second older brother will definitely take revenge for you," he said softly. This winter in the Ding capital seemed to be a really eventful period as storms came one after another. The massacre of Prince Yu's entire household was known by everyone, and even though the commoners were secretly clapping their hands in joy, they also knew of the dangers involved. And the only surviving new bride, the eldest young lady of the Shen family, was sent to prison. Because she was inextricably linked to this case, everyone stuck their heads out to inquire about the results. In the end, on this day, there was suddenly news that the eldest young lady of the Shen family had hanged herself in prison using her belt. Before she died, she left a blood letter saying that she had nothing to do with this matter, and with her husband's family dead, she was unwilling to live in this world and could only die to show her will. People were very strange as they were much more tolerant towards the dead. If it was previously because Shen Qing got pregnant out of wedlock and married to Prince Yu, she would be called a loose woman who did not abide by the ways of a woman, but now that she died, it attracted a lot of sighs. Everyone praised her for having integrity and strength of character, but she was harmed by Prince Yu for a lifetime. The previous rumors seemed to have collapsed overnight. Thinking about it, to be able to make a pregnant female die to show her will, one would think that there must be a huge grievance. Moreover, those rumors were without any basis. Shen Qing and Prince Yu had no grievances, and with Prince Yu's death, she still had to be a widow, so it was not worthwhile. Thus it seemed that with Shen Qing's death, Shen residence and Shen Qing's suspicions were washed clean. Even Emperor Wen Hui in the palace did not say anything, but they were still unable to find out who the murderer was, and the case would most likely become an unsolved case. In the Shen residence, everything seemed to be no different from the past. Shen Qing had already married into Prince Yu residence, and her corpse would be buried together with Prince Yu in the name of Prince Yu's consort. Old Shen Furen felt slightly comforted because of this. No matter if it was dead or alive, the Shen family finally had a Wang Fei, and at least the reputation was not bad. Shen Wan and Chen Roqiu appeared to be very sad and Shen Yu was crying uncontrollably, but even though they were so sad, they did not even go to the prison to visit Shen Qing, thus no one knew if they were acting or sincere. In comparison, Shen Gui, as a father, was much colder. He did his work as usual, and there was no sign of sorrow on his face. Occasionally, when one looked at him, one could even see a flash of joy in his eyes. Perhaps to Shen Gui, Chen Qing's suicide had saved him a lot of trouble. Naturally, he was happy in his heart. As for Shen Yuan, the entire burden of the second household of the Shen family had fallen onto his shoulders. Every day he would be running around outside and there was almost no one in the residence, so one did not know what the situation was. If one were to talk about the person that made people sigh the most, it would be Ren Wanyun. After Ren Wanyun got to know the news of Shen Qing committing suicide in the prison, she fainted on the spot. After she woke up, she was somewhat delirious and pulled Xiang Lan's hand, saying that she wanted to see Shen Qing return to her home. It was obvious that this matter was a huge blow to Ren Wanyun, and in such a delirious situation, naturally she was unable to be the master of the second household. Shen Gui let Wan Yinyang temporarily take charge of the second household's matters, and everyone in Kaiyun Yuan were secretly whispering that at the end of the Shen family's second household, Wan Yinyang would most likely be able to make a comeback, and even that sick and weak Shen Dongling would most likely be able to make a comeback in one fell swoop. Fortunately, old Shen Furen's heart ached for Shen Yuanbo and in the end did not let Wan Yinyang take care of her grandson, but brought Shen Yuanbo to Rongjing Tang and personally raised him. Chapter 257. The second and third household of the Shen family were in a mess, but it had nothing to do with the first household at all. When Shen Xian and Luo Shuaiyan came back this time, they already had some complaints about the other two households, so naturally they would not rush to help. Every day they would practice swordplay in the residence or go out to visit old friends, and it was considered to be a comfortable life. Shen Qiu was also brought along by Shen Xian to gradually come into contact with the officials. As Shen Qiu's military merits became more and more abundant, there would be a day when Shen Xian's position would be Shen Qiu's turn to sit. As for Shen Miao, after resting for a while, she once again went to Guangwentang. As it was nearing the end of the year, the teachers in Guangwentang had slacked off a lot in their lessons. The teachers also knew that at this time, the students were not in the mood to study, so they conveniently gave a good impression. Shen Miao did not go for many days but did not fall behind in her homework. On the contrary, when those students saw her, they started to discuss spiritedly. Shen Qing's matter was in an uproar, but no one in the Shen family had any opinion on it. Early on after the incident in Prince Yu residence, Shen Yu was ordered by Chen Roqiu to stay in the residence and not go to the academy, so as to avoid any mistakes. Thus when Shen Miao came, everyone had the interest to inquire. Yi Peilan said, "Oh, Shen Miao. You actually came. Why are you not wearing plain clothes?" She deliberately raised her voice, "Ai, it is no wonder. At the beginning Shen Qing and you two sisters also had many frictions, but one fear that you were not that upset." Yi Peilan and Shen Qing were good friends and wanted to help Shen Qing vent her anger, thus the words that she said were naturally filled with 120% malicious intent. Everyone looked towards the door and saw Shen Miao wearing a dark black long dress with a simple jade bracelet as her jewelry, making her look somewhat cold. In fact, it was not too much to dress up like this, but compared to Shen Yu's plain white long dress with a small white flower on her head, it was slightly inferior. Ming Qi's law states that when there is a funeral in the family, one must wear white clothes when the elder has passed away. Could it be that young Lady Yi does not know how to calculate seniority? Eldest sister is my sister but not my elder. Shen Miao answered without even turning her head and walked to her own seat to sit down. When Feng and Ning saw her, she seemed to be very excited, as if she had a stomach full of questions to ask her. When Yi Peilan was stabbed by Shen Miao, she was unable to restrain her anger and said without thinking, "Shen Miao, do not try to be a good person. Initially it was you and Shen Qing who did not get along, and when Shen Qing was in trouble, you were secretly happy in your heart. Otherwise, why would your father and mother, who are Shenqing's uncle and auntie, not lend a helping hand when Shenqing was imprisoned? When the words were spoken, everyone's eyes immediately looked towards Shen Miao, as if waiting for her to answer this thorny question. That's right, when Shenqing was imprisoned, Shen Xian indeed did not lend a helping hand. Otherwise, with Shen Xian's meritorious service, he would still be able to speak in front of the emperor. At the very least, he would be able to help Shenqing fight for some time. At the very least, Shenqing would not have felt so hopeless and helpless in prison that she hung herself. Shen Miao's eyes turned cold and suddenly turned to stare at Yi Pei Lan. When Yi Pei Lan was stared at by her, she unconsciously felt a chill. Before she could speak again, she heard Shen Miao's mocking voice ringing, "Young Lady Yi and my eldest sister have always had a deep sisterly relationship, and one think that young Lady Yi would be very upset for eldest sister. But at the beginning my second Shen hoped to rescue eldest sister and came to the Yi residence to invite Yi Furen for a chat, hoping that Yi Furen would be able to persuade Yi Darren to help, but I remember that at that time Yi Furen claimed to be sick and refused to meet." Yi Pei Lan was surprised for a moment before her face flushed red. The surrounding students looked at her with deep meaning in their eyes. She stuttered, that is because my mother is indeed sick. Since Yi Furen could claim to be sick at this juncture, why can't my father and mother claim to be sick at this juncture? Shen Miao did not care. Her words did not contain a single dirty word, but she ruthlessly humiliated Yi Pei Lan. Shen Miao continued speaking, "Since it is something that Yi Furen is unable to do, why would young Lady Yi force others to do it? My eldest sister is in prison and even her closest relatives, second Shu and second older brother, are unable to do anything. You think that it is easy to rescue her? Young Lady Yi, one's mouth only has two pieces and it is easier said than done. Do not do to others what you do not want others to do to you. If next time you want to teach others a lesson, please do it yourself first before saying anything." Chapter 258. Pei Lang just entered the hall and heard Shen Miao's words. He looked towards the middle of the hall and saw Shen Miao standing ramrod straight. Her clear and light words had completely humiliated Yi Pei Lan and the entire Yi residence. Yi Pei Lan was speechless and could only bite her lower lips as she stared at Shen Miao. That's right. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. The Yi residence was a master that changed the direction of the wind and still stood on the moral high ground to criticize others. It was really laughable. Shen Miao. Feeling more and more annoyed, Yi Pei Lan was about to rush up and fight with Shen Miao when she heard a light cough and Pei Lang walked in from outside. Seeing teacher, everyone immediately kept quiet. Yi Pei Lan's anger had not dissipated when she heard Pei Lang lightly saying, "One cannot quarrel in the academy." Finishing, he gave Yi Pei Lan a warning look. Everyone knew that in Guangwen Tang, even though Pei Lang was a scholar and had a gentle temperament, he was respected by others. Even with Yi Pei Lan's arrogant and willful character, she did not dare to argue with him. Shen Miao sat down on her seat and Feng and Ning nudged her arm and whispered, "Teacher Pei is helping you out. Yi Pei Lan is too much that even Teacher Pei could not stand it." Shen Miao looked up and met Pei Lang's gaze. In that gentle expression, there was a little more probing, as if he wanted to see what exactly she was thinking. She met Pei Lang's gaze and her lips hooked up imperceptibly as she slowly smiled. Pei Lang was slightly startled. The young female had a delicate and pretty appearance and was cold and dignified, but that smile just now seemed to have some charm that only an adult female would have. There was a trace of faintly discernible seduction that made one could not help but want to explore the secrets within. However, at that moment, Shen Miao lowered her head and that short-lived smile seemed to be an illusion. Feng Xian Pawnshop naturally knew all the rumors in the Ding capital, be it big or small matters. Ji Yushu buried his head in his abacus and said to the two people opposite him, "The Jiang Nanchen family's transaction is really worth it. With such a large sum of money, this pawn shop would not need to open for 3 years. You just eat up so much money and not leave any for fifth Shen young lady." Gao Yang jokingly said, in any case, others are the ones who sell information. Ji Yushu's lips twitched. She herself said that the money will belong to me and I took such a big risk to create news for her. Otherwise how can the matter of Prince Yu residence be handled so cleanly without any future troubles? He said, what's more, if he didn't tell Qin Yushan that he didn't want money, I wouldn't be able to do business for 30 years after this transaction. Thanks to her, I didn't earn so much. If she wasn't a woman, I would definitely teach her a lesson. If you really teach her a lesson, I will definitely send you a coffin. Gao Yang gently fanned himself with a gentle smile, but the words that he said made one's teeth itch. Prince Yu of the first rank wanted to harm her and was exterminated by her entire family. Her own sisters schemed against her and she took their lives. Such a vicious and merciless girl, I bet you would die in less than 3 moves. Less of that. Ji Yushu was dissatisfied, this lord that weak? Moreover, no matter how powerful she is still a female and females have weaknesses. Ji Yushu looked at Xie Jingxing who was indifferently drinking tea at the side and said, put it this way, if there is a day when 5th Shin young lady falls in love with our 3rd Xie older brother, she would definitely be pestering and coquettish. No matter how tempered she is, she would not be able to match our 3rd older brother's tenderness. At that time, even if 3rd Xia older brother points a sword at her, she would not even frown. Ha! Gao Yang looked at him coldly. At that time, she would first cut 3rd Xia into 8 pieces and then mince him to feed the dogs. 3rd Xia older brother, Gao Yang scolded you as a dog. Ji Yushu immediately complained. Xie Jingxing played with the hairpin in his hands and rolled his eyes at both of them. There was a rare trace of awe on his face. They are here. Chapter 259. They are here. Following Xie Jingxing's words, Gao Yang's teasing expression was immediately kept away and he looked at him. You said that they are here in the Ding capital. You all pay more attention these few days. Xie Jingxing frowned. The things in Prince Yu residence might have been spread out. To avoid exposing your identity, all of you should not go out these days. But how can you do it alone? Not waiting for Gao Yang to speak, Ji Yushu anxiously said, you had already attracted their attention and now that they have entered the Ding capital, they will definitely look for you first. You cannot alarm the other people in the capital. No need to worry. Xie Jingxing stretched his waist and a trace of ruthlessness bloomed in his smile. I have waited for them to come for a long time. 3rd older brother Xie, you are going to teach people a lesson again? Ji Yushu's eyes were sparkling as he looked at him. Can you bring me along this time? All right. Xie Jingxing casually said, you can be a target. Gao Yang, the matter regarding Prince Yu and the Shin family in the Ding capital was quickly drowned in the joy of the approaching new year. Since it was the new year, there was a lively atmosphere everywhere. The tragic massacre on that snowy night and the desperate suicide in the gloomy prison seemed to have been thrown to the back of people's minds. Nothing was more important than welcoming the new year. Time would not stop. New snow would cover the old snow, new topics would cover the old discussions, and new hope would always be more joyous than the past. The emperor in the palace did not show any gloomy expression because of the matter and even spent a lot of money to set up a palace banquet in the palace and invited all the concubines to celebrate the new year. Obviously the death of his younger brother did not make Emperor Wenhui feel sad and this made the commoners feel that the heartless rumors of the imperial family was true. But only the really smart people knew that Emperor Wenhui had gotten rid of a future trouble and was able to handle it so cleanly that he was naturally happy. Thus even when the Yamen was unable to find the murderer and the entire case became an unsolved case, Emperor Wenhui did not pursue it too much. Shen Qing and Prince Yu were buried together in the imperial family tomb. But because Shen Qing committed suicide and her identity was too awkward at that time, the imperial family did not give any compensation. This made old Shen Furen very indignant for a while. In the western courtyard of the Shen residence, Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang were taking Shen Miao's books out to bask in the sun. Shin Xian and Luo Shuayan went to the drill grounds early in the morning to train the new soldiers. There were new soldiers to be recruited at the end of the year and they had to be trained. Shin Qiu also went to join in the fun and only Shin Miao was left in the western courtyard. A few days ago eldest young master sent a number of books over, why not bring them out to dry? Guyu asked Shin Miao. I still have use for those books so there is no need to dry them. Shin Miao answered. Ever since Shin Qiu saw so many military books in Shin Miao's room, he immediately told the matter to Shin Xian and Luo Shuayan in high spirits. But Shin Miao had never shown that she liked the art of war, thus Shin Xian and Luo Shuayan thought that it was just a spur-of-the-moment interest. Nevertheless, they still ordered people to search for many military books. If one did not know, the Tian Shin Yang would Shin Ming be the Shin. Naturally Shin Miao did not have any plans to be a female general, but the Shin family army would have to face a lot of dangers in the future, and she could only rely on the understanding of the past lifetime to help the Shin family army through these possible difficulties. There was no harm in reading more. Bai Lu was flipping the pages as she spoke. Tomorrow is the Jade Rabbit Festival. Heard that this year there will be tens of thousands of lanterns by the Wanli Lake. Will young lady go tomorrow? The Jade Rabbit Festival was a festival in Mingqi. On the night before the New Year, people would walk out of their houses and go to the streets to look at the lanterns and guess riddles, making it very lively. In the lanterns, there would be an especially big jade rabbit that would bless the entire Mingqi with good weather in the coming year and the commoners would have a good harvest. The difference between this year's Jade Rabbit Festival and the previous years was that this year's Jade Rabbit would be on the water. At that time, the commoners would be able to place their own lanterns on the water to pray for their inner wishes. Lanterns on the water, the picture would definitely be very lively. Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang were both females in their prime and it was normal for them to be playful and love new things. Chapter 260. What nonsense are you talking about? Guyu said in annoyance, at that time the streets will definitely be very crowded. What if something happens to young lady? But didn't we all go in the past? Bai Lu was unconvinced. Previous years are previous years, this year is this year. Guyu said fiercely. What Bai Lu said was not wrong. In previous years at this time, Shin Xian and wife would have already returned to the Ding capital and the entire Shin residents would go out to watch the bustle during the Jade Rabbit Festival, but this year the Shin residents and Prince Yu residents had such a big matter and the murderer behind it had not been found. If there was someone waiting for an opportunity to retaliate, Shin Miao's situation would indeed be much more dangerous. No matter how big the liveliness, it was not as important as Shin Miao's safety. It's fine. Shin Miao smiled gently, I also wanted to go and take a look at the bustle. With father, mother and eldest brother around, there would not be any danger. But Guyu still wanted to persuade. That's all. Shin Miao interrupted her words and walked back into the room. Guyu could only suppress the worry in her heart. One did not know from when Shin Miao had developed a character of one's own words, and there was no longer the appearance of her seeking help from those two from the second and third household. It was indeed good to have one's own thoughts, but when she was stubborn, it made one feel helpless. Shin Miao returned to the room and walked to her table to sit down. Her gaze fell on the plum tree branches outside. The branches were dotted with red, but it reminded her of the letter that she had received previously. The Chen brothers had already returned to Jiangnan and after Prince Yu residence was exterminated, they no longer had any contact. Shin Miao was extremely cautious and all the communication with the Chen family was done through Mo Qing's letter to the Feng Xian pawn shop. Now that Mo Qing's life contract was no longer with the Shin family, others would not suspect her. This time, Mo Qing brought back another piece of news. That young lady Luing that Ji Yu Shu had previously inquired about finally had her whereabouts. She was in the biggest money-squandering establishment in the Ding capital, Baoxiang Lu. Young Lady Luing was one of the top beauties in Baoxiang Lu, and one heard that on the day of the Jade Rabbit Festival, she would also act as the Jade Rabbit Fairy and dance by the Wanli Lake. She really wanted to take a look, so she could take advantage of this opportunity. As for the matter of revenge that Guyu was worried about, it was not even worth mentioning to Shen Miao. The Chen brothers were cooperating with her in the first place, so there was no need to talk about revenge. As for the Shen residents, old Shen Furen was so angry that other than her 2 sons and the second household's grandson, she did not see anyone else. The second household of the Shen family was considered to have collapsed, and Shen Yuan was busy fawning on the officials and would not make a move on her in the near future. The third branch had always concealed their strength and bided their time. At this critical juncture, they would not cause any trouble. Now that he thought about it, there wasn't a year that was more comfortable than this year. Thinking like this, Shen Miao's lips slightly curled up, and Gu Yu, who was looking at her from outside, could not help but be startled. Before she could recover to her senses, she heard Jingzhe's voice. Jingzhe walked in from outside and said, "Young lady, Wan Yinyang of the Eastern Courtyard wants to see you." "Wan clan?" Guyu frowned and whispered, "Why is it her again? Why does this Wan Yinyang keep running over to our courtyard?" Shuangjiang and Bai Lu also whispered, "This is too eager to curry favor." The few maids were not very welcoming towards Madame Wan. In fact, ever since the matter with Ren Wanyun and Shin Qing, they hated the people of the second household. No matter what Wan Yinyang's motive was, she was after all a person of the second household, and it made one very uncomfortable to run over here all day. A few days ago, when Wan Yinyang wanted to see Shen Miao used all kinds of means to push her away. But today she said, "Let her in." Jingzhe was surprised for a moment before replying and went out. It was Gu Yu and the rest who had a worried look on their faces, fearing that Wan Yinyang had some bad ideas. Chapter 261. After a moment, Wan Yinyang walked in with Jingzhe, and Shen Miao raised her head to look at her. Wan Yinyang was wearing a dark blue-lined jacket and a green horse skirt with a plain silver bracelet on her wrist, looking like an extremely simple person. However, looking at it carefully, the lined jacket was embroidered with little white flowers and the hem of the skirt was changed to a wavy shape. That pair of fair hands were painted with bright nail polish that was dazzling to one's eyes. As for the waistline of the jacket, it made her already slim and graceful figure even more so, causing one's imagination to roam. Looking up, an oval face, big eyes, white skin, red lips, and when she smiled over, even though she tried to restrain it, the coquettish charm in her bones was still revealed. This was a female that knew how to hide. It could be seen from the fact that she did not show her face for so many years because of Shen Dongling, but she was a female that could not keep her cool. Once Shen Qing died and Ren Wanyun went crazy, she could not wait to come out and strut around. Shen Miao had seen a lot of this kind of people in the inner palace in her previous life. Some of them were clever and some of them had good looks. They thought that as long as they were willing, they would be able to firmly control a male's heart. But they did not know that there were countless fresh and tender females in the world, and a male's heart was the most unpredictable. If one was able to keep their cool, perhaps one could have a special position in a male's heart, but once one could not keep their cool, those little cleverness would become a joke of one thinking oneself clever. Wan Yinyang was obviously the kind of person who thought herself clever. Wan Yinyang bowed towards Shen Miao and sat down on the small table opposite Shen Miao. She was sitting sideways and her legs were slightly slanted, making her body very smooth and soft. She was indeed worthy of being a leading role in the Huadan. Shen Miao looked at her calmly and did not say any nonsense and went straight to the point. "Why did Wan Yinyang come to look for me?" Wan Yinyang did not expect that Shen Miao would open her mouth so directly that it made her choke. She heard that Shen Xian and wife had the greatest power in the Shen residence and that the most idiotic fifth young lady was now a powerful one. Thinking that she came over to worm her way in, she did not think that Shen Miao would not even entertain her. This made Wan Yinyang somewhat uncertain whether Shen Miao did not understand the ways of the world or was deliberately mystifying. In fact, Wan Yinyang was thinking too much. Shen Miao did not bother with her because a Yinyang was not worth her attention. Wan Yinyang smiled apologetically. It is nearing the end of the year, so this concubine came over to see fifth young lady and wish fifth young lady a happy new year. She said, "It seems that because of eldest young lady's matter, I had a disagreement with fifth young lady. I apologize to fifth young lady on behalf of master and Furen." Shen Miao looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. "Wan Yinyang, do not know if second Shu and second Shen know of your apologizing on behalf of others?" Wan Yinyang was slightly stumped but continued to smile. This concubine's words naturally carry little weight and had heard master mention to this concubine that it was somewhat impulsive that day, thus this concubine acted on her own initiative and came to seek fifth young lady's punishment. Shen Miao looked at her without blinking her eyes. Being stared at by Shen Miao like that, Wan Yinyang's face showed some restlessness, but she immediately suppressed it and smiled. Actually, third young lady also wanted to come and see fifth young lady since they are all sisters, but third young lady recently felt cold and was afraid of the limelight. She only said that she would come and talk to fifth young lady when her body is better. Shen Dongling. Shen Miao raised her eyebrows. Other than the 3D daughters in the Shen residence, there was actually another Shu daughter, Shen Dongling of the second household, who was born to Wan Yinyang. In the Shen residence, the third household, Shen Wan and Chen Ro Qiu, only had Shen Yu as a daughter. Shen Xian and wife only had Shen Miao and Shen Qiu, but this second household, Shen Gui, had taken in a room full of concubines and also gave birth to Shu daughters, but they died not long after. This was also the reason why the ranking of the D daughters in the Shen family was somewhat strange. Chapter 262. Shen Dongling was ranked third, so she was called third. Mississippi Ren Wanyun's character was the most jealous, and after Wan Yinyang gave birth to Shen Dongling, she stayed in the courtyard all day and did not come out. That Shen Dongling was also a weak and sickly person, thus in Ren Wanyun's past and present lifetime, she did not have any impression of Shen Dongling at all. She was practically a transparent person. Even if she was a concubine's daughter that was no longer favored by any noble family, perhaps she would be bullied and humiliated, or even scolded, but she would not be like this. She was practically forgotten by everyone. Such a person, if he wasn't so weak that he could be ignored, then he was so strong that he could endure what normal people couldn't. In the previous lifetime, Shen Dongling was given to someone else by Ren Wanyun as a bargaining chip for Shen Gui's career. In this lifetime, Ren Wanyun had lost her power and Wan Yinyang once again flew to a high branch. It was unknown if Shen Dongling's fate would change because of this. Third older sister's health is not good, so it is better not to come out. Shen Miao said in an indifferent manner, "If one were to catch a cold because of this, I would not be able to afford it." Wan Yinyang was somewhat displeased when she heard it, but there was still a smile on her face as she said, "This is third young lady's closeness to fifth young lady. It is all this concubine's fault that third young lady was born with an illness and could only watch other children play in the courtyard for so many years." Finishing, she turned her head and used the handkerchief in her hand to cover her mouth, looking extremely sad. Shen Miao somewhat could not stand Wan Yinyang's pretentious attitude and said lightly, "No one can decide their own body. Moreover, it is not necessarily bad for third older sister to stay in the courtyard. Eldest older sister was able to enjoy to the fullest, but who knew that a beauty has an unlucky life?" Her lips slightly hooked up. One's fortune is not something that can be seen on the surface. When the words were said, Wan Yinyang looked at Shen Miao with some bewilderment, and after a moment she forced a smile. "Fifth young lady is right." She suddenly stood up again and looked at Shen Miao. "Fifth young lady." This concubine suddenly remembered that there are still some matters and will leave first. If there is a day when fifth young lady is free, one think that third young lady will come and talk to fifth young lady. Her health is not good, so one hope that fifth young lady will be more tolerant. Finishing, she bowed towards Shen Miao and left. However, Compared to the figure that had just arrived, he seemed to be in a much more hurried and panicked state. Jingzhe had been serving tea by the side and looking at the back view of Wan Yinyang leaving in a hurry. She said in puzzlement, "What is the meaning of this Wan Yinyang? Was he here to express goodwill? And third young lady hasn't left the courtyard for so many years and has only seen young lady a few times. Why do you speak as if you have some feelings for her?" "You're right." Gu Yu was cleaning up the table of Wan Yinyang's remaining teacups as she spoke. Now thinking about it, this servant also cannot remember how third young lady looks like. In any case, she is a young lady of the residence and was hidden for so many years. Most likely it was to hide from second Furen. It is really pitiful. What's there to pity? Shen Miao picked up the tea on the table and took a sip, one fear that in her eyes, "You all are very pitiful." Jingzhe was puzzled. Young lady is talking about third young lady? Shen Miao smiled. "It is I who have misjudged. In our residence, there is still a smart person." The purpose of Wan Yinyang's visit today was obviously to probe. However, with Wan Yinyang's intelligence, to be able to think of such a method to probe, on the surface it seemed that she could not wait to announce that she had regained Chen Gui's favor, but upon careful thought, it was not exactly so. The dragon's head and not the tail, that Shen Dongling who had not shown her face was much smarter than Shen Qing. But no matter which side she was on, Shen Miao would not treat her as a friend, not to mention a sister. "All be on guard." She put down the teacup in her hands and reminded the maids beside her. Chapter 263. But at the other end, Wan Yinyang hurriedly returned to her own courtyard and closed the door before taking 3 steps forward and said to the figure sitting behind the screen, "Linger." The figure behind the screen paused for a moment and looked towards Wan Yinyang. Wan Yinyang heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the wooden chair before repeating everything that she had said to Shen Miao today from beginning to end. She was originally a Hua Dan actor and her memory was very good, thus she recited the conversation between the two of them as if it happened right in front of her. After finishing, Wan Yinyang then said, "Linger, what exactly does fifth young lady's words mean? My heart felt somewhat cold when I heard it. Do you think that eldest young lady's matter is related to fifth young lady?" Yinyang must speak cautiously. The person behind the screen said, "Eldest sister's matter is already in the past and what is said outside is what is said. One must never mention this matter again, otherwise one would only harm oneself. I just feel that my heart is somewhat uneasy." Wan Yinyang said. A slight sigh came from behind the screen. The person who was sitting put down the embroidery in her hands and stood up before walking to Wan Yinyang's side. That was also a delicate and beautiful young female. Compared to Shen Qing's generosity, Shen Yu's elegance and Shen Miao's dignity, this young female appeared soft and weak. Her facial features were somewhat like Wan Yinyang's and she had an oval face and big eyes. If her eyes were more quick-witted, most likely she would be scolded as a little vixen. But her expression was pale and even her lips were bloodless. As such, that little bit of seductiveness was reduced and she looked somewhat harmless. She was wearing an old washed goose yellow-colored dress which could possibly belong to Wan Yinyang. This young female's body was not as developed as Wan Yinyang's and when she wore it, it was somewhat big and empty, thus her beauty was reduced and she looked somewhat ordinary. That young female was the Shu daughter of the Shen family's second household, Shen Dongling. Now everything is much better than before. Shen Dongling comforted, "At least Yinyang and I can openly go out and no longer need to be threatened by Furen. This Shen residence is not easy to get by." Wan Yinyang looked at her daughter and her heart turned sour. "In the beginning I was greedy for riches and thought that after entering the Shen residence, one would be able to sleep easy for the rest of one's life. Who knew that being in a noble family is also so tough? For so many years, in order to survive under Madame's eyes, you have no choice but to live like this. The people in this manor are also very powerful. Even the originally quiet fifth young miss looks really scary now." Yinyang, Shen Dongling shook her head, regardless of whether eldest sister's matter is related to fifth younger sister, the person behind the scenes has helped us. It will be very difficult for Furen to make a comeback now. Even if second brother is powerful and Furen has the reputation, she has no hope of the past and will not be able to compete with us. That is also true. Wan Yinyang looked at Shin Dongling with a gratified expression. Finally it is over. But Ling, today you asked me to test fifth miss, but fifth miss is quite cold to me. I'm afraid she doesn't want to accept our goodwill. What should we do now? Do not accept, then do not accept. Shin Dongling smiled. Fifth younger sister seems to be an intelligent person. Since that is the case, it is better not to provoke her in the future. If it is possible, it is also good to let her deal with second older brother. Second young master. Wan Yinyang was surprised for a moment. Second young master has already entered officialdom and fifth young lady is only a young lady. How can she deal with second young master? Yinyang can rest assured. Shin Dongling said, fifth younger sister is not a simple character. She is the sharpest knife in the Shin residence. The small actions of the eastern and western courtyard of the Shin residence were most likely not known by the outside. Other than the people in the residence, most likely in the eyes of the other people in the Ding capital, the general residence was a happy and harmonious scene with benevolent and filial piety. This had always been the case before this year, but unfortunately the things in the world were always changing. Sometimes when the seeds were buried too deep, it would germinate and grow at an unexpected time. Chapter 264. In the training courtyard outside of the Shin residence, Mo Qing was sparring with Shin Qiu's personal soldier Ah Qi. Ah Qi was currently one of Shin Qiu's subordinates with the best martial arts skills, but Mo Qing was able to fight evenly with him. In the beginning, when Shin Miao introduced Mo Qing to Shin Qiu also had the intention to test Mo Qing's abilities, and at the end of the test, Mo Qing was still quite good. Shin Qiu was naturally very happy. A strong general would not have weak soldiers, and if he had more strong soldiers under him, the reputation of the Shin family's army would be even more resounding. Ever since he recruited Mo Qing, Shin Qiu kept praising Shin Miao's foresight and occasionally pestered Shin Miao to accidentally discover such a talent in the marketplace, but was rejected by Shin Miao's supercilious eyes. In the previous lifetime there was only one commander of the guards, and from what Shin Qiu said, could it be that the streets and alleys were filled with commanders of the guards? After Ah Qi and Mo Qing finished a round of sparring, they were so tired that they were drenched in sweat. Ah Qi suddenly gulped down a large mouthful of water and said, "It is really refreshing to spar with Brother Mo. Brother Mo's swordsmanship is really superb and makes one envious." Mo Qing cupped his hands. Brother Ah Qi has overpraised. My swordsmanship is not considered superb. There is always someone better than you in the universe, and there are many experts in this world. Could it be that there is someone whose swordsmanship is better than Brother Mo? Ah Qi smiled. Then I really want to experience it. Mo Qing did not speak, but his mind was that night in Wulong Temple. He carried Shin Qing on his back and changed rooms with Shin Miao, thus changing the fates of both of them. That night, there was a black-clad person who came in from the window and easily snatched his sword in 5 moves. In that person's hands, he was as weak as a child, and he heard Shin Miao calling him, "Little Xie Marquis." That young man's swordsmanship was truly superb. Ah Qi sighed for a while before speaking. One do not know how delightful it is to kill the enemy together with Brother Mo on the battlefield. I am actually somewhat impatient. Unfortunately, General will stay in the Ding capital for half a year because of young lady. If one want to join hands to repel the enemy, one would have to wait for half a year. He looked at Mo Qing. Speaking of which, our family's young lady really has a discerning eye for heroes. It is really rare to find a person like Brother Mo. Young lady is an amazing person. Mo Qing said. After following Shin Miao for a long time, he did not like some of Shin Miao's actions. As a female, Shin Miao was cruel and heartless, without sympathy, vicious and cold, but it was impossible to hate her, because the people she dealt with were people who wanted to put her to death. Mo Qing remembered that day when Shen Miao lifted the curtain of the horse carriage and asked him with a smile, "Are you willing to sell all your martial arts skills to my Shen family? A scholar would die for a bosom friend." From a certain aspect, Shen Miao was Mo Qing's benefactor. Ah, Qi punched him. "I know, you are the person chosen by Miss, of course you will think well of her. Just protect her during the Jade Rabbit Festival tomorrow." Mo Qing suddenly raised his head and looked up. "What?" Ah Qi followed his gaze and said in confusion, "There's nothing there." "Most likely I sensed wrongly." Mo Qing shook his head and ignored the strange feeling in his heart just now. At the other side of the wall, there were two people squatting there. These two people were dressed in hemp clothes and wore bamboo hats that covered their faces so one could not see their appearance at a glance. One of them said, "This Shen residence is indeed full of talented people. Even a guard has such ability and almost discovered both of us." "Correct." The other person lowered his voice to discuss, "There are many guards outside the Shen residence and there are also Shen Xian soldiers. It would be too risky to take action from inside and one feared that it would not be easy to succeed. One would also alert the enemy. If in the future Shen Miao is protected impenetrably, one feared that it would be more difficult to take action. The higher-ups had given the order and it was not easy to get some news." That person's companion said, "Once we capture her and get the result, this trip would not be considered as a waste. Both of us only need to wait to be promoted. How can one give up midway? Naturally one cannot give up." The bamboo hat person laughed. "Just now did the two guards not say that Shen Miao will be traveling during the Jade Rabbit Festival tomorrow? At that time there will be a surge of people and it would be easy to do something. At that time, one group of people will lure the Shen family away and another group of people will bring her away. Do it cleanly and neatly." That person's words were filled with ruthlessness. "In order to eliminate future troubles, tie her up and throw her into the lake after getting the news. Do not have any other ideas." "Naturally." Chapter 265. On the day of the Jade Rabbit Festival, it was indeed exceptionally lively. After Shen Miao had her dinner, Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang hurriedly ran in and said to her, "Young lady, there are people setting off fireworks in the city. One heard that there will be continuous fireworks tonight and it will be very nice to look at." The anticipation in the words was not concealed at all. "What is there to panic about?" Guyu was combing Shen Miao's hair at the same time as she reprimanded, "One will have to go and see and there is no rush." Before the words were finished, one could hear Shen Qiu's laughing voice from outside, "Has younger sister tidied up? Father and mother are waiting for us at the front hall." Replying to eldest young master. Jing Zhe replied from outside, "Young lady's hair is not combed yet. Trouble one to wait a while more." "How can a young lady's hair be combed for so long?" Shen Qiu muttered, "It is already as long as a soldier's armor." Finishing, he shouted towards the room, "Younger sister, I will go to the front hall to wait for you. You can come over yourself." Shen Miao complied through the window. Guyu just finished combing her hair and was picking and choosing in the box before finally finding a jade hairpin and inserted it into Shen Miao's hair. Shen Miao swept a glance at the bronze mirror and could not help but be startled. "Why is it this? This servant sees that this hairpin matches well with young lady's clothes." Guyu smiled, "Moreover this hairpin is exquisitely made but not cumbersome. It is just right to match with today's single spiral hairpin." Shen Miao could not help but reach out to touch the hairpin on her head. That was the jade begonia hairpin that Xie Jingxing gave her. This hairpin was later appraised by Gu Yu and a few others and it was absolutely priceless. Shen Miao originally wanted to return it to Xie Jingxing but later dropped the thought as she thought that there would be a day where she would be strapped for money and could use it to exchange for some money to spend. But if Xie Jingxing knew about it, one did not know how angry he would be. "Does young lady feel that this hairpin is not good?" Gu Yu saw Shen Miao's hesitant look and said, "Why not change another one?" There are a lot of jewelry that eldest young master sent over from the palace, and most likely one can find some good-looking hairpins. No need. Shen Miao interrupted her, one fear that it will take more time to search. Let it be like this. It was just a hairpin, she thought. Guyu helped her to adjust her collar and put on a cloak for her before smiling, this is good. Do not forget the small heater. Jingzhe stuffed a hand warmer into her hands. When Shen Miao and entourage reached the main hall, everyone in the Shen residence was already present. Because in previous years it was always the Shen residents that went to the Jade Rabbit Festival together, it was the same this year. Chen Roqiu and Shen Wan were talking. Shen Yu was wearing a light pink 12-tattered fairy long dress and the hem of the dress was swaying. In such cold weather, what she was wearing inside was extremely thin and there was a pink peach-colored embroidered cloak on the outside which was good to look at but useless. Most likely it could not even withstand the wind, but she had an extremely satisfied look, and when she saw Shen Miao coming, she smiled and called her fifth younger sister. Shen Miao nodded her head at her and turned to look at Shen Gui's side. If one were to say that this year was different from previous years, it would be that Ren Wanyun and Shen Yuanbo were not around. In the past it was Ren Wanyun who took care of Shen Yuanbo, but now Ren Wanyun had lost her mind and could not go out. Shen Yuanbo was too young and there were so many kidnappers on the streets, so old Shen Furen wanted Shen Yuanbo to stay in the residence with her. Shen Yuan stood by Shen Wan's side, and behind Shen Wan, Wan Yinyang was holding a young female's hand and that young female was looking over. This was the Shu daughter of the second household, Shen Dongling. Shen Dongling was wearing an apricot-colored long jacket, and most likely it was because of the fear of the cold that she mentioned. That jacket was extremely thick and big, but it made her look very thin. Actually, looking at it seriously, her facial features were as beautiful as Wan Yinyang, but one did not know why her temperament was so light that it was almost invisible. She did not greet Shen Miao and only looked at her silently. One did not know if she was shy or indifferent. Chapter 266. Shen Miao retracted her gaze but heard Shen Qiu making a ruckus at the side. Younger sister, you are getting more and more beautiful now. Brat. Shen Xian gave Shen Qiu a kick when he heard that. When was your younger sister not beautiful? Luo Shuayan also smiled as she walked to Shen Miao's side and held her hand. Our Jiao Jiao is also a big young lady. Everyone's eyes in the hall looked towards Shen Miao with some unclear meaning. A year ago, Shen Miao was still a silly eldest sister who was wearing gold and silver and had makeup that was thicker than the white walls. Now she was wearing a purplish gold embroidered cotton padded clothes, and her cloak was also the color of peonies with exquisite lace embroidered on it. Her hair was combed into a single spiral bun and there was a jade hairpin in the bun. There was no jingling of ornaments, but there was a kind of gorgeous air of nobility. Her facial features were delicate and clear, and her eyes were as clear as a little beast. If this appearance was gentle and graceful, it would be full of femininity, but one did not know why she stood dignified like the bright moon in the 9 heavens, making one have a feeling of not being able to look at her. Compared to all the females in the room, one felt that the entire room was filled with mediocre rouge and powder. A trace of jealousy flashed in Shen Yu's eyes. She had thought that Shen Miao, who was the most incomparable to her in the residence, had unknowingly snatched away her limelight. Shen Yu was most confident in her own scholarly elegance and beauty, but when she saw Shen Miao today, she actually felt a sense of inferiority. She raised her head to look at Chen Roqiu, hoping to see a little disdain towards Shen Miao from her mother's eyes, but she also saw a trace of graveness in Chen Roqiu's eyes which made her heart even colder. Wan Yinyang sighed in her heart and unconsciously held Shen Dongling's hand tighter. She did not have any other thoughts and only felt that Shen Miao was indeed a D daughter. The bearing of a D daughter was just different. No matter how intelligent her own daughter was, she had been shut up in the courtyard for so many years, and in terms of nobility, she was still unable to be compared to Shen Miao. The males in the room did not have any reaction, and other than Shen Xian and Shen Qiu, Shen Gui and Shen Wan at best only frowned. As for Shin Yuan, he was staring at Shin Miao and no one knew what he was thinking about. Chen Ruoqiu changed the topic, since everyone is here, let's set off now. Old Shin Furen was old and naturally would not be able to see such a scene. In the Shin residence, only old Shin Furen, Shin Yuan Bo, Ren Wan Yun and the concubines of the second household were left. The others wanted to go to the streets to watch the excitement of the Jade Rabbit Festival. If it was in previous years, naturally they would be talking and laughing wittily along the way, but this year because of Shin Miao's big fire in the ancestral hall, Shin Xian and Shin Qiu almost deliberately kept a distance from the other two and only spoke to Luo Shuiyan. The guards of the Shin residence followed behind. In fact, every year in the Ding capital, in order to protect the safety of the common people and to prevent bandits from causing trouble when the crowd was crowded, the city guards would increase the number of people patrolling the streets, thus it was considered safe to stroll around. Shin Xian did not speak to Shin Gui and Shin Wan, so Shin Gui and Shin Wan did not invite a rebuff and the two brothers chatted on their own. Shin Yu used to walk together with Shin Qing and Shin Miao as Shin Miao was able to set off her educated and reasonable character. Now that Shin Miao was not willing to pay attention to her, Shin Yu was also not willing to let Shin Miao steal the limelight, so she went to look for Shin Dongling to talk. When Wan Yinyang saw that Shin Yu was willing to get close, naturally she was extremely happy. It was just that one did not know if Shin Dongling was shy, as she did not seem to be enthusiastic towards Shin Yu and instead looked somewhat timid. After a while, Shin Yu also lost interest. This group of people strolled on the streets and the atmosphere was somewhat awkward. To say that it was not harmonious, it was indeed the entire residence's people walking together. To say that it was harmonious, it was clear that the few of them had their own formation. Chapter 267. As Shin Miao was walking, she was seriously looking at the lanterns and riddles on the streets. Shin Xian and the rest did not like to guess riddles because they were all rough people from military families, so how would they be able to settle down to guess such genteel things? Using Shin Qiu's words, if younger sister likes that lantern, tomorrow eldest brother will go to the capital to find a master to carve the exact same one for you. Why waste so much effort? Shin Qiu was unable to understand the elegance of Chen Ruoqiu and entourage. After Chen Ruoqiu and the rest finished guessing the lantern riddles and when they were walking forward, Wan Yinyang suddenly spoke to Shin Gui, Master, one heard that there will be a Jade Rabbit fairy dancing at the Wanli Lake tonight. This year the Jade Rabbit lantern will also be placed at the lakeside, so let us go over there to take a look. When Chen Ruoqiu heard it, she frowned and said softly, that Jade Rabbit fairy is from Baoxiang Lu and one feared that it would not be good to bring along young ladies in our residence. What kind of place was Baoxiang Lu? It was the biggest money-squandering establishment in the Ding capital and the young ladies there were all warm and fragrant. How many men would abandon their wives and throw away 1,000 gold just to sleep with the young ladies of Baoxiang Lu? Mentioning Baoxiang Lu, at least the main household would feel ashamed. However, no matter how much those Furens and Furens despised it, it was unable to change the fact that the young ladies of Baoxiang Lu were all talented. Thus this year's Jade Rabbit fairy still fell to the young ladies of Baoxiang Lu to act. Second Furen. Wan Yinyang softly said, even so, it is only an act. One think that in front of so many people, that Jade Rabbit fairy would not do anything inappropriate and is only watching the bustle, so there is no need to be so serious. Wan Yinyang originally did not want to fight with Chen Ruoqiu, but like Ren Wan Yun, she could not bear to see Chen Ruoqiu's aloof and virtuous appearance, always putting on the airs of a scholarly family. Compared to Ren Wan Yun, Wan Yinyang hated Chen Ruoqiu even more because she herself came from an opera troupe. Chen Ruoqiu suppressing that Baoxiang Lu today was undoubtedly looking down on her style. Both of their tit-for-tat was heard by everyone and in a moment the atmosphere became somewhat interesting. Males would not intervene in the dispute between females, so Shin Dongling only held Wan Yinyang's hands and tightly shut her lips without speaking. Shin Yu had the heart to argue for Chen Ruoqiu but felt that it would be beneath her identity as a D daughter, thus no one spoke for a moment. Who said that going to the Wanli Lake is to see the Jade Rabbit Fairy? In the silence, Shen Miao spoke softly. It is not every day that one can see the grand occasion of tens of thousands of people releasing lanterns. Moreover, there was no choice whether one was born rich or poor. There was no need to look down on others because of that. No matter what her identity is, she is the Jade Rabbit Fairy today. A person with a clear heart, why should she care about these external things? Everyone was stunned for a moment. Shen Xian was the first to laugh. Jiao Jiao is right. We have no choice but to be born rich and poor. What is the point of looking down on others? Luo Shuiyan also smiled. They were fighting on the battlefield. Some of the soldiers in the army were from the royal families, but most of them were commoners. Some of them couldn't even afford to eat, and some of the elders in their families were about to starve to death. When it came to their origins, they all had their own hardships. Thus they would never look down on the poor. Shen Miao's words were very much in line with both of their hearts. Younger sister. Shen Qiu patted Shen Miao's shoulders. Your tone is that of a great person who cares about the world. This kind of breadth of mind, even eldest brother is ashamed of my inferiority. Even though she knew that Shen Qiu was teasing her, Shen Miao was slightly absent-minded. In the previous life, she married Fu Xiu and became the Empress. Previously it was indeed because of love, but as the Empress, the responsibilities that she bore were no less than others. The words motherly model of the world meant that all the commoners could live and work in peace and contentment. The higher-ups must love their own people. This was something that Fu Xiu taught her, even though Fu Xiu himself did not do it. Chapter 268. As they echoed each other, Chen Rouqiu's face turned green and white. Shen Xian praised Shen Miao for being frank. Wasn't it setting off her hypocrisy? Shen Wan's expression was also somewhat gloomy and Shen Yu was already exploding with anger, but she restrained herself from saying a few sarcastic words to Shen Miao. Wan Yinyang thought that Shen Miao's words were to help her and a trace of joy surfaced on her face. When Shen Dongling saw it, she shook her head slightly. Shen Yuan still had a sneering appearance and Shen Gui also pretended not to know. Then let's go to the Wanli Lake. Luo Shuiyan ordered. She was a person who was used to being a female general, so it was natural for her to give orders. No matter how unwilling the Shen family's people were, they could only follow because of the Shen family's army guards behind them. The Wanli Lake was located in the west of the center of the Ding capital and the entire lake was embedded in the heart of the city. In the spring, it was like a piece of jade, and when it came to winter, snow would fall on the surface of the lake and there would be boats cruising on the lake. It was quite interesting to drink wine and discuss history. Today there was also light snow, and under the illumination of the thousands of lights, the snowflakes were like crystal-clear jade flowers that fell from the sky. The willow trees by the lakeside were all covered with snowflakes, and for a moment one was unable to differentiate which was the snow and which was the lights. Before reaching the Wanli Lake, one could hear the sound of fireworks. When one raised one's head, one could see that in the dark of the night, the large expanse of fireworks almost dazzled one's eyes. There was a tide of people below, some were lovers holding hands or some were a happy and harmonious family. All of them raised their heads to look at the fireworks, looking at this moment of eternity. Young lady, quickly look. Jingzhe said excitedly, that is the fireworks by the Wanli Lake. One heard that the fireworks tonight will be set off for the entire night. It is really beautiful. Guyu also muttered. Ha! The Ding capital is indeed bustling. Shen Qiu said to Luo Shuiyan, it is much more fun than our northwestern region. Luo Shuiyan was also sighing as she walked. As she walked forward, she suddenly saw the crowd running forward and one did not know what they were anxious about. Shen Xian grabbed a male that ran past him and asked, this brother, what is in front? Why is everyone running forward? The Jade Rabbit Fairy has arrived. That person said, everyone went to see the Jade Rabbit Fairy. He took a look at Shin Xian and suddenly said, "Brother must be new here. This year the Jade Rabbit Fairy is disguised by Bao Xiang Lu's young lady Luing. Brother should quickly go over." Finishing, he ran away happily. Shin Xian turned back and Luo Shuayan said in a lukewarm tone, "Still not going to see that young lady Luing? Furen is not saying." Shin Xian wiped the sweat off his forehead, "I have not seen enough of Furen. What kind of person is young lady Luing? Definitely not as beautiful and generous as Furen." Even so, since they were already here, Luo Shuayan did not want to spoil everyone's mood. She continued walking forward. After squeezing through the crowd, one suddenly heard someone shouting, "Young lady Luing is here. Young lady Luing is here." Shin Miao's stature was too small and she could not see up, so Shin Qiu pulled her to the stone platform at the side and placed her down before standing beside Shin Miao. Shin Miao raised her head and saw a flower carriage surrounded by the crowd. It was winter, but the float was decorated with fresh flowers. It was enough to show the effort of the person behind it. The flowers were beautiful purple and brilliant red, so for a moment they couldn't see them clearly. But at this moment, they could clearly see the people inside the flower carriage. It was a young woman in the prime of her youth. She wore a white cotton dress and a velvet cloak over her head. Her hair was combed into a flying fairy bun, making her look like a fairy. She had delicate eyebrows and teeth that were like braided shells. What was most attractive about her was her pair of long and narrow eyes. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, which added a touch of charm for no reason. It was cold and tempting, light but heavy. It was as if the wind around them had a hint of ambiguous fragrance with her arrival. This Jade Rabbit Fairy was said to be an immortal, but there was a hint of the mortal world. She was said to be in the mortal world, but her enchanting coldness was a color that the mortal world did not have. Chapter 269. Luing was not born to be very beautiful, and in terms of facial features, she was slightly inferior to Wan Yinyang, but that kind of cold enchanting in her bones made one's heart itch. Whether this Jade Rabbit Fairy was an immortal or a demon, it made one ponder, but this kind of tone to an ordinary male was enough to captivate one's soul. Shin Miao's eyes stopped on Luing for a moment but turned her head to look at the surroundings, wanting to see if that person had arrived. After looking one round, she did not discover anything, and when Shin Qiu saw her actions, he asked curiously, "Younger sister, what are you looking at? Why is older brother not looking at this young lady Luing?" Shin Miao directly changed the topic. Even though Shin Qiu was not stupid, he would not think much whenever he met Shin Miao. When he heard Shin Miao's question, he answered, "I do not like this." Shin Miao raised her eyebrows and said, "Then what does older brother like?" Shin Qiu was unable to speak. Shin Miao felt that Shin Qiu's embarrassed look was very interesting and wanted to laugh. In the previous life, Shin Qiu married that vicious sister-in-law, and from the beginning to the end, he most likely did not meet any young lady that he admired. Now that he was reborn, he did not know who was the one that was fated to be his sister-in-law in this lifetime. "Let's go." Shin Qiu stretched out his hand towards Shin Miao, wanting to pull her down from the stone platform. Just now, in order to let Shin Miao see that young lady Luing clearly, Shin Qiu brought her to this side and was separated by 10 meters from Shin Xian and the rest. Now that she had finished watching the bustle, naturally she would return to Shin Xian's side and go to the Wanli Lake to release the lanterns. Just as Shin Miao was about to jump down, she suddenly heard a child crying. Shin Qiu also heard it, and both of them turned their heads to look and saw that a few meters away, there was a 3 or 4-year-old child hanging upside down from a shop on the shore. Most likely the child was mischievous and climbed to a high place to watch the bustle but ended up slipping. Both his hands were tightly holding onto the ladder and half of his body was hanging outside. If he were to fall like this, one feared that it would be a big problem. The surrounding people had already gone to get a ladder, but the child could not hold on for long. Seeing that the little hands were getting weaker and weaker, the child's mother had already covered her face and cried. younger sister, wait for me here. When Shinqiu saw that, he quickly instructed Shin Miao. Thinking that it was only a few meters away from the stone platform and he knew martial arts, he immediately headed over. Before he reached, the child's hand went limp and he fell to the ground. The surrounding people cried out in alarm. Shinqiu's toes tapped lightly and he stepped on the pillar beside him. He soared into the air and caught the child, barely saving the child's life. The surrounding people were all applauding his move. Shinqiu returned the child to the child's mother and the child's mother repeatedly apologized to him with tears in her eyes, making Shinqiu somewhat embarrassed. It was not easy to appease this pair of mother and son, and Shinqiu prepared to return to the stone platform to fetch Shin Miao. Because he was only a few meters away, he was stunned the moment he turned his head. The stone platform was empty. There was not a single person on it. Shinqiu's heart tightened, and with 3 quick steps, he forcefully pushed through the crowd and ran to the front of the stone platform. There was no one there, not even a trace. Shinqiu's heart still harbored hope and looked around before calling out loudly, "Jiao Jiao." But no one answered him. He grabbed a person standing not far from the stone platform and asked, "Where's the little girl who was standing here just now? Did you see the little girl here?" That person replied impatiently, "What little girl?" "No, no." Finishing, he looked at him again, "Could it be that your family's young lady was abducted by others? There are many kidnappers in this Jade Rabbit Festival, and if there are no guards, the residence's young lady would be separated from others. Then 8 or 9 out of 10 would be abducted by kidnappers." Shinqiu's body trembled violently. The 8-chi tall burly man, who did not even blink his eyes in front of the enemy on the battlefield, at this moment, suddenly changed color. Chapter 270. On the street beside the lake of Wanli, there were 2 people walking in the crowd. One was wearing a blue robe and a jade crown with an imposing appearance, while the other was wearing a purple robe and had a handsome face like a painting. These 2 people were not bad, especially that purple-clad youth. There was a kind of elegance and nobility in his actions, and there was a faint smile on his lips which made the surrounding females to look over from time to time. "How long are you going to follow me?" Xie Jingxing asked. Su Mingfeng shook his head. "Such a festival, as a good friend, one should naturally travel together." "Why are you not willing?" "I still have things to do. An invitation is not as good as a chance encounter. Since we met, then travel together with me. How many times have we not traveled together during the Jade Rabbit Festival?" Su Mingfeng was dissatisfied. "You are becoming more and more mysterious now." Today Su Mingfeng was traveling with the Su family and coincidentally met Xie Jingxing alone, so he pulled Xie Jingxing along. The relationship between the Su family and the Xie family was good, thus Master Su would not say anything. At this moment Master Su and the rest were walking in front while Su Mingfeng and Xie Jingxing were walking behind. Su Mingfeng asked, "You came out alone again today. Your father is not angry?" The Jade Rabbit Festival was usually a family trip, and now there was only Xie Jingxing alone. Without thinking, it was definitely Xie Jingxing who came out alone. Xie Ding most likely exploded with anger. There was no choice as he had such a son. It felt like he came over to collect a debt in the previous lifetime. With his son accompanying, "I will not join in the fun." Xie Jingxing said indifferently, "I am not that free." Su Mingfeng shook his head, "You are really free and easy." Just as he was speaking, he saw a group of people walking over. Su Mingfeng was surprised for a moment. "Is that not General Shen?" Xie Jingxing looked up and saw Shen Xian hurriedly walking over, and following closely behind him was Shen Qiu and Luo Shuiyan. Behind them was a group of guards and everyone's expression was very heavy and nervous. Su Mingfeng touched his chin. It seems that the Shen family is in some trouble. Why is there such an expression? In the midst of a crowd brimming with joy, the Shen family's expression was very abrupt. One did not need to think to know that it was definitely not a good thing. Master Su also saw them and stopped to chat with them. Xie Jingxing and Su Mingfeng did not go forward and only stood far away. They were all martial artists and could hear each other's conversation. Master Su asked, "Where is General Shen going?" "Ha, casually stroll around." Shen Xian said, "It is just that wife's body suddenly felt unwell and had to return to the residence first." Master Su, have a good time. Finished speaking, he cupped his hands and left without looking back. The Shen family and the Su family did not have the same political views. Seeing that Shen Xian did not want to talk to him, Master Su naturally did not feel comfortable in his heart. He was too lazy to meddle in other people's business and walked forward. It was Su Mingfeng who said, "General Shen is so arrogant, but why does it look like something big has happened? Even if Shen Furen is not feeling well, there is no need to bring so many guards." Xie Jingxing's eyes swept across the group of guards and said, "Fifth young lady of the Shen family is not present." Ah! Su Mingfeng was surprised. Shen Miao is not present. Xie Jingxing looked at the Shen family's entourage. With Shen Miao's relationship with the other two households, it was impossible for her to abandon her mother at this time and enjoy the lanterns with the other two households. And in this entourage, there was no Shen Miao's figure. It could not be that Shen Miao did not even leave the residence today. For such a big festival, even if Shen Miao was unwilling, Shen Xian would not leave her alone in the residence. Just at this moment, one suddenly heard a soft voice, "Older sister Shen is missing." Xie Jingxing lowered his head. Su Minglang did not know when did he slip away from Master Su's side and ran to Su Mingfeng's side. He pulled his eldest brother's clothes and repeated, "Just now I secretly ran over to their place and heard those people saying to find older sister Shen as soon as possible." Su Minglang was a glutinous rice dumpling that could be ignored in the crowd. It was because he was bold that he was not afraid of being separated by the crowd and not being able to find his way back. They said that perhaps older sister Shen was kidnapped by kidnappers. Su Minglang continued, "Eldest brother, let us go and rescue older sister Shen." Missing? Xie Jingxing thoughtfully looked at the back of the Shen family's entourage that were far away and suddenly said to Su Mingfeng, "Do not make this matter public. I will leave first." He then looked down at Su Minglang and smiled evilly, "If you were to speak about the matter of Shen Miao not being seen, I will sell you to the kidnappers." Chapter 271. During the Jade Rabbit Festival in the Ding capital, every year there would be numerous young ladies who would be abducted by kidnappers. If it was a male child, it would be better. Most likely they would be sold to those remote places that were unable to give birth to children, to be a son. If it was a female child or a young female, then it would be miserable. Those who did not have good looks would be passed around a few times by the traffickers and sold to a large family to be a servant girl. If they were good-looking, they would not be as good as those with average looks. Perhaps they would be sold to an opera troupe, or perhaps they would be sold to a brothel or simply become a Yangzhou skinny horse. After being trained for a few years, they would become a pet for the nobles to play with. Among these females, there was no lack of large families, but when it came to kidnappers, there was no difference in family background. No matter if one was a young lady from a large family or a commoner, once one was in the hands of a kidnapper, everyone would be the same. Shen young lady was abducted by kidnappers. In the room, Jiu Shu suddenly stood up and paced back and forth, showing some worry. Shen young lady is not bad looking and has an outstanding bearing. One fear that if she falls into the hands of kidnappers, she would definitely be sold. Even though I also like young lady Xiaoyao, I do not wish for Shen young lady to become a young lady. Third Xia older brother, do we go and save her? Gao Yang scoffed at Ji Yushu's words, "Are you alright? With Shen Miao's means, how could she be abducted by kidnappers? Moreover, kidnappers would only pick single young ladies or lost children. Shen Qiu and Shen Xian are not far from Shen Miao, and those kidnappers are not fools. How would they pick such a big thorn?" Shen Miao's looks are also not an outstanding beauty, so it is not worth it. These words were not wrong. When kidnappers abduct people, they would do it when people were not paying attention. Even if they abducted and sold a young lady from an official's family, they would also pick a time when that young lady was not around. But the people who investigated the news said that at that time Shen Miao was by the Wanli Lake, and at that time the crowd was surging. Even though it was easy for the kidnappers to make their move, but if they were not careful and were discovered, they would not be able to escape with so many people. Such a risky matter, if it was for an outstanding beauty, it would still be justifiable. Shen Miao was after all a young lady, and even though she was not bad, it was not to the point where one would lose one's rationality. The most important thing was that at that time Shen Qiu and Shen Xian were not far away. Since ancient times, bullying the weak and fearing the strong was the norm that bad people followed. Obviously, knowing that Shen Xian's family did not look like they were good to provoke, how would the kidnapper find trouble for himself? It was a risky and unprofitable business, unless the kidnapper was a fool too. Ji Yushu was suddenly enlightened, so to speak, it was not done by kidnappers. Who could it be? This is obviously directed at Shen young lady. Could it be the remaining party of Prince Yu residents? As he spoke he shook his head. Prince Yu's people did not know that the extermination of the entire family was related to Shen Miao. Could it be the Shen family's people? I heard that the Shen family is not on good terms. Could it be someone from the other branches? Xie Jingxing, who had been sitting silently by the side, stood up and said, "It's them." They? Gao Yang suddenly became nervous and looked at Xie Jingxing. They have already found out. I don't think so. Xie Jingxing shook his head. I was waiting for them to make a move, but nothing happened. Now he understood that they might have known about the secret chamber and did not know what methods they used to know that Shen Miao was present that day. Our identity has not been exposed, so they planned to find out from Shen Miao's mouth. They were sent by you. Ji Yushu was surprised for a moment before he felt a headache. Oh no. With those people's methods, Shen young lady would not feel good if she landed in their hands. Let the MOU Army's secret department come out to search. Search along the surroundings of the Wanli Lake. There are many eyes and they should not have gone far. Xie Jingxing said in a deep voice. The casual expression on his face was completely gone and his solemn look was not like that of a 17 or 18-year-old youth, but had an unfathomable chill. Chapter 272. It is not good for the MOU army to move out now. Gao Yang frowned. Now there are too many people watching you in the Ding capital, and if the higher-ups were to be alerted, one fear that the trouble would not be small. It is better to let people guard the city gates and tomorrow morning send your residence's people to quietly search the city. It would be better to beat the grass and startle the snake now. Still need to wait for a night. Ji Yushu jumped up. If one wait for a night, Shen young lady would be long dead. Ji Yushu was after all young and impetuous and appreciated Shen Miao. Different from Gao Yang, who already had the cruelty and ruthlessness of a politician, in some aspects, Ji Yushu still retained a youth's precious sincerity and naivety. Gao Yang was angry. What time is it already and you are still thinking of Shen Miao? If one is not careful, our identities will be exposed. Now send the secret department's people to search. Xie Jingxing said coldly, I do not want to say it a second time. Third Xie. Gao Yang looked at him, you want to destroy the big plan because of a girl. Do not forget what you said. Gao Yang, pay attention to your identity. Xie Jingxing suddenly snapped. His brows were slightly wrinkled and the ink in his peach blossom eyes was even deeper than the Ding capital's night. The sudden anger that was emitted made Gao Yang could not help but tremble. When Ji Yushu saw the situation, he quickly smoothed things over. Today's matter happened suddenly and no one had expected it. But perhaps the situation is not that bad. First think about what is going on. Xie Jingxing was silent for a moment before saying, "Not for anyone but to play such drastic measures in my territory, it really makes one uncomfortable. Since they have the guts to come, tonight let them have a taste of what is called no return." The Wanli Lake was crowded with people and the cheers and laughter drowned out all other sounds. The matter of an official's young lady disappearing did not seem to cause much of a commotion. This was of course because the Shen family did not spread it out, but even if it was spread out, one feared that people would only be busy admiring the grand occasion in front of them. The Jade Rabbit Fairy had already finished her dance and the males were dazed from watching it while the females were secretly cursing the vixen. The huge Jade Rabbit lantern was made of snow-white silk cloth. It was coated with a thick layer of grease and was painted with the image of the Jade Rabbit playing with joy. It was decorated with bright and dim candles, slowly floating on the surface of the Wanli Lake. The people cheered and ran to the edge of the lake to put down the lanterns they had made. The lanterns were filled with their wishes for the coming year. They rolled them into small strips of paper and placed them in the lanterns before gently pushing them into the water. Light snow started to fall from the sky. However, the lights on the Wanli Lake were bright and the fireworks in the sky were bright. For a moment, it was hard to tell if it was in the sky or under the water. Such a beautiful scene that was brightly lit, even during the previous Jade Rabbit Festival, it was a rare sight. There were a few exquisitely carved pleasure boats floating in the middle of the lake. Usually, the nobles would book these pleasure boats to drink and make merry. Today, no one knew who was on these pleasure boats. Because the lake was filled with lanterns, the pleasure boats did not attract much attention. An unlit pleasure boat was leisurely drifting downstream on the surface of the Wanli Lake. There were fewer people downstream and the lanterns were all drifting along with the waves. From afar, the pleasure boat seemed to be surrounded by those lanterns. However, the further it went downstream, the further away it was from the city, and the fewer people there were. In the end, there was practically no one there. Shen Miao was sitting in the innermost room of the pleasure boat and looked coldly at the two people in front of her. In the dim pleasure boat, there was a small oil lamp that was lit. Shen Miao's mouth was stuffed with a piece of rag and her hands and feet were tied up so well that she could not break free. The two people on the pleasure boat were dressed in hemp garments and looked very unfamiliar. A tall and skinny man stood at the bow of the boat and looked around. He then walked into the cabin and nodded to the shorter man, saying, "All right, there's no one here." Chapter 273. That short man laughed and stretched out his hand to pull out the rag in Shen Miao's mouth. "Shen young lady, there is no one here, so do not shout. If you shout, we still have the time to kill you and run." Shen Miao's eyes moved slightly but she did not speak. These people did the opposite and the pleasure boat floated downstream in public. Shen Xian and the rest would only search for her whereabouts on the shore and would not think that she was in the middle of the Wanli Lake under the watchful eyes of everyone. Just now, when she was standing on the stone platform waiting for Shen Qiu to come back, she was dragged away from behind with her mouth and nose covered. The two of them moved so quickly that she didn't even have time to react before she was tied up and thrown onto the boat. Seeing that Shen Miao did not speak, the short one was also quite satisfied. The tall and skinny one walked over and sat opposite her. His eyes were very gloomy as he said, "Shen young lady, straightforward people do not speak in riddles. We looked for you to inquire about a matter." The tall and skinny one exuded a very unique temperament. This kind of temperament was not like an ordinary bandit. He said, "That day you have already gone to the secret chamber of Prince Yu residence." Shen Miao's eyes flashed. When she was abducted, she thought of many possibilities. Perhaps it was the second household or third household people, perhaps it was Shen Yuan or Prince Yu's old subordinates. She even thought about Fu Xiu-yi, but she did not expect that the target was that secret chamber. Other than Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang, no one else knew about the secret chamber. Could it be that Fu Xiu-yi knew about it a few years in advance? But since the other party came prepared, it was obvious that they had clearly understood her background. Shen Miao did not hide it and replied, yes. That day eldest brother was handling matters in Prince Yu residence and I was waiting in the tea room. I accidentally discovered that secret chamber and went to take a look out of curiosity. The two people opposite looked at each other and the short one said, then you should have met someone in the secret chamber. Who was that person? Shen Miao's fingers slightly shrunk. It was not because of the secret chamber's secrets or the things in the secret chamber, but it was actually for the people inside. Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang. These people came for Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang. Shen Miao's mind quickly turned. These people only knew that there was someone else in the secret chamber that day but did not know who that person was. Perhaps Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang were hiding something, and if she were to say it out, Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang's secret would be exposed. She looked at him in confusion. Someone else? The tall and thin man looked at her viciously. Miss Shen, don't play tricks in front of us. When you entered the secret chamber that day, we believed that it was a coincidence. However, the things in the secret chamber had already been taken away. Who did you meet in the secret chamber? Tell me and I'll spare your life. Shen Miao stared at him, but her mind was quickly calculating. She only knew about the secret chamber of Prince Yu residence because of her previous life, so in these people's eyes, she could only accidentally discover the location of the secret chamber. These people might be investigating something, but they didn't know who they were. Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang were the people they were looking for. She shook her head. When I entered the secret chamber that day, there was no one else inside. As for the thing you mentioned, I didn't see it either. Perhaps before I went in, those people you mentioned had already left. Impossible. The tall and thin man looked at her and suddenly revealed a cruel smile. Miss Shen, since you do not speak, then one must let you suffer a bit. When the words were spoken, that short man's eyes brightened and a hand reached out to touch Shen Miao's face. There was a somewhat lascivious look on his face as he said, Little Beauty's skin is really smooth. Why not wait for you to serve older brother and perhaps you will be able to remember. Finishing, he went to unbutton Shen Miao's clothes. Chapter 274. If you touch me, I will definitely bite my tongue and commit suicide. You will not be able to find out anything. Shen Miao lightly said, I have lost my innocence and my heart would be like dead ashes. In despair, do you think that you still have a chance to get information out of me? When the words were said, the short one's hand suddenly stopped and turned to look at the skinny and tall one. The skinny and tall one stared at Shen Miao and asked, You know who it is? Shen Miao gently smiled, Perhaps I can still remember. The short one was somewhat dumbfounded and the skinny and tall one's eyes were gloomy and uncertain. Perhaps Shen Miao's overly calm attitude made them somewhat unprepared, or perhaps they were surprised that Shen Miao was able to turn around and threaten the other party in such a situation. There was no female who did not care about their innocence, but Shen Miao's appearance was like a hoodlum on the streets. Correct, if Shen Miao really knew who the person in the secret chamber was, once she was touched, Shen Miao, who was filled with hatred towards them, would most likely not reveal the truth for the rest of her life. Shen Miao's eyes were slightly cold. Everyone would have their own weakness. These two people opposite seemed to want to know who the person in the secret chamber was, and now she was perhaps the only person in this world who knew the whereabouts. If she was a delicate official's young lady, she might be scared and tell the truth. Unfortunately, she was Empress Shen who had gone through many hardships in the inner palace. What do you want to think? The short one did not touch her again and changed to a friendly look. Say who that person is and we will promise you. His tone was like coaxing a child. Shen Miao did not even blink as she said, Who are you? Both of them were startled for a moment before the skinny and tall one sneered, What benefits is there for you to know who both of us are? Perhaps I will be able to remember who that person is. Shen Miao smiled as she looked at him. You are delaying time. Shen Miao declined to comment. The short one, suddenly, stood up and slapped Shen Miao's mouth without even thinking. It was as if his patience had finally run out as he said, "Smelly girl, refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Do not talk nonsense with her. Shin'Xian's soldiers are outside and we cannot go out. Bring her back first and after returning." His smile was somewhat distorted. Naturally there will be ways to make her speak the truth. He bent down and touched Shin Miao's face with his disgusting hand. "Little girl, Grandpa treated you kindly just now to save trouble. Since you don't want to live, don't blame others." Shin Miao's eyes turned cold and suddenly raised the knife in her hand to stab the other person's face. That short person was caught off guard and was slashed on his face by Shin Miao and blood immediately flowed out. Behind Shin Miao, one did not know when the ropes binding her hands and feet had been removed. She was used to hiding a dagger in her sleeve. Now that this dagger was taken out, it was a surprise. After rowing for a while, she ran out of the boat and shouted, "Help!" Just as she reached the cabin, she was violently grabbed by the hand, dragged in, and thrown to the ground. Her entire back knocked against the wooden table on the ship. She gasped in pain, and the ship shook a few times. Her reaction was fast and without saying anything, she immediately stood up and ran out again. The tall and skinny man sneered and kicked her kneecap, and that was a heart-wrenching pain. Shin Miao recovered to her senses and raised the dagger in her hands to poke that person's eyes. The tall and skinny man jumped in shock and dodged to the side, avoiding the tip of her dagger. He scolded, "Vicious woman," and snatched the dagger from her hands. Shin Miao endured the pain in her legs and used her hands to climb to the cabin's window and jumped down without even blinking. "Want to run?" The tall and skinny man sneered and did not hesitate to throw the dagger in his hands over, and it went straight into Shin Miao's calf. Even though it did not go deep, a line of bright red blood quickly appeared on the surface of the lake.